Chapter 805. Bei Su woke up from the pile of rocks he had built and immediately heard a slight rustling sound outside the pile of rocks. Upon hearing this rustling sound, Bei Su felt all the hair on his body stand on end. This rustling sound was like a curse in the cave continent's underground world. It was the sound made by the Thread-Blade Centipede group. The Thread-Blade Centipede was not considered a fae, and its only attack power was its big mouth. As long as an adult was careful not to be bitten by the Thread-Blade Centipede's big mouth, a few steps would be enough to trample it to death. The reason why Bei Su felt his hair stand on end was because he thought of a legend. The Thread-Blade Centipede did not actually like to gnaw on flesh. Instead, it liked to use its big mouth to scrape metal spiritual ingredients. It was rumored that the place where the Thread-Blade Centipede group appeared was likely to have an underground dimensional rift. For anyone who did not have a fae in the cave continent, an underground dimensional rift was equivalent to a funeral that could not be escaped. Just as Bei Su suddenly recalled that Lin Yuan had teleported a fae for him at the Celestial Council, a black shadow pasted on Bei Su's face, giving him a fright. Bei Su focused his eyes and found out that this black shadow was a bat that looked like it was only the size of his palm. Upon seeing the fae that Lin Yuan had teleported to him, Bei Su was delighted and realized that he was finally going to become a spirit chi professional. However, Bei Su immediately fell into despair. Even if he contracted the fae in his hand now, could he really survive in front of a large number of underground lifeforms gushing out of the underground dimensional rift? Seeing that the Thread-Blade Centipede had already drilled in from the gap of the pile of rocks, Bei Su immediately circulated his spiritual energy and contracted the bat fae in his hand. Bei Su's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Bei Su's request was just to exchange for a fae from Lin Yuan, but he did not expect Lin Yuan to give him such a powerful fae. Bei Su's eyes were filled with deep gratitude, surprise and longing. After feeling the Edge Shadow Bat's ability, Bei Su finally knew why Lin Yuan had said to him, "You can do it." With the Edge Shadow Bat, the curse on his body, Stone Worm, would no longer be a restriction on his identity. Just after Bei Su formed a contract with the Razor Shadow Bat, Bei Su discovered a black ring engraved with a bat pattern and 2 bottles of spirit liquid on the ground through his mental connection with the bat. Bei Su, who had been mining since he was born, only knew that faes were rare in the cave continent's underground world. Bei Su did not know what the black bat-shaped ring and the 2 bottles of spirit liquid that Lin Yuan had teleported over were for. However, Bei Su was certain that these 2 items were part of the surprise that Lin Yuan had mentioned. Bei Su carefully wrapped the black ring and the spirit liquid with the insect wings he just got and put them in his arms. Then he stood up from the pile of rubble and commanded the Shadow Edge Bat to use its wing shadow blade to kill the blade thread snakes that had burrowed into the cracks of the rocks one by one. Looking at the insect carcass on the ground, Bei Su habitually summoned the willpower rune that he had comprehended before. However, he did not expect that the Edge Shadow Bat that he had just contracted would suddenly collide with the willpower rune that he had just summoned. Following that, Bei Su's mouth grew bigger and bigger, and there was even a suspicious liquid dripping from the corner of his lips. While Bei Su was confused, he found that his contracted Shadow Edge Bat was becoming stronger and stronger. Bei Su was completely confused about the Shadow Edge Bat's changes, but he knew that after the Shadow Edge Bat became stronger, the willpower rune that he had comprehended had disappeared. Sensing the Shadow Edge Bat's strength after becoming stronger, Bei Su felt that even if a Class 1 underground dimensional rift really opened, he might be able to kill his way out by relying on the Shadow Edge Bat. If he had God's view and could see Bei Su's situation, he would probably spit out a mouthful of blood. He had forgotten that due to the disparity in knowledge and information, Bei Su did not know what the diamond face storage box and the 2 bottles of spirit liquid were for without him saying anything. The things that Lin Yuan wanted Bei Su to increase his strength had become a burden that Bei Su needed to carry and protect at all times. Due to Bei Su's identity as a stone worm, he did not even know the common knowledge that everyone in the Radiance Federation knew about fae's quality and grade, as well as the relationship between willpower runes and fantasy breed faes. Bei Su did not even know that when his Shadow Edge Bat had evolved into a fantasy breed, it had accidentally stimulated the bat species fae's emperor bloodline and transformed into a monarch bat. Fortunately, with the Bronze X/Fantasy Eye Monarch Bat, Bei Su indeed had the ability to protect himself in the rock continent's underground world and could survive. On the other side, Lin woke up from the soft bed. After waking up, Lin's heart was pounding. Knowing that she had seen the light again, Lin did not immediately open her eyes. Instead, after a long time, Lin's eyes secretly opened a gap. Through this gap, Lin saw a world that was both familiar and strange to her. Everywhere she looked, there was a kind of indescribable beauty and reality. Colors, shapes, fine textures, all of these were specific to the current Lin. Just a glance at such a world made Lin sink into fascination. A lot of tears gushed out of Lin's eyes. The tears slid down Lin's nose and they were abnormally warm. The moment the tears flowed down Lin's face revealed an extremely brilliant smile. This smile perfectly described what it meant to cry tears of joy. At this moment, a thin sound came from the door of Lin's room. Clearly, even if someone walked on the fur carpet, they were still afraid of disturbing Lin. Lin saw her mother walking in from the door. Lin's mother, Guanda, walked in and wanted to cover Lin with a blanket, but she didn't expect Lin to wake up. The moment she saw Lin, Guanda was stunned. This was because Guanda discovered that not only did an azure leopard totem appear on Lin's left cheek, but even the right cheek had a white lion-shaped totem that was a whole circle smaller than the azure leopard totem. Guanda, who was born in a 5-star family, could remain calm even if a mountain collapsed in front of her. But after seeing the totem on Lin's left and right cheeks, she couldn't help but tremble. Guanda had always felt that her daughter Lin had a hard life. But now, even if Lin's eyes still couldn't see anything in Guanda's heart, Lin was the luckiest person in the world. Guanda didn't expect Lin to awaken the most precious Lingyan White Lion Spirit Rune from the 4-star clan and the Azure Cloud Leopard Spirit Rune from the 5-star Guan clan during her afternoon nap. The first one was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 806. Guanda had been taking Lin into seclusion so that she could have a stable and peaceful life after losing her sight. Now that Lin had awakened the Azure Cloud Leopard Spirit Pattern and the Spirit Speech White Lion Spirit Pattern, she was fully qualified to freely enter and exit the Guan family's Azure Cloud Leopard Mystic Realm and the family's Spirit Speech White Lion Mystic Realm. At that moment, 11 of the Azure Federation's 12 major 5-star aristocratic families possessed the Azure Legacy Beast Pattern's younger generation. Only the Guan family's younger generation had yet to master the Azure Legacy Beast Pattern, causing the Guan family's influence among the Azure continent's 12 major 5-star aristocratic families to slowly weaken. Now the Guan family's Beast Pattern Envoy had finally appeared. Moreover, the Guan family's Beast Pattern Envoy was also the family's Beast Pattern Envoy. With the two aristocratic families' Beast Pattern Envoys, Lin could already be called the most distinguished member of the younger generation in the Azure Federation. At that thought, Guanda's eyes were a little moist. At that moment, a pair of hands gently wiped the corners of Guanda's eyes, and a pleasant voice was filled with worry. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Upon hearing that, Guanda subconsciously wanted to say that she was not crying. However, Guanda suddenly reacted and looked at Lin in disbelief. Lin, you can see clearly?" Lin nodded her head lightly. "Mommy, I can see this world clearly like a normal person." Looking at the clear and wonderful world, Lin felt as if she had been reborn. At that moment, Lin Yuan, who was enhancing phase in the Spirit Lock spatial zone, would never have thought that he had been afraid that Lin's eyes could not fully recover, so he had injected more vitality. He had actually imperceptibly created an Azure Envoy that was about to bloom in the Azure Federation. These few days could be said to be Lin Yuan's busiest days. Although Lin Yuan had worked so hard before, he had also left the Spirit Lock spatial zone a few times in addition to nurturing phase. He had received the Law Origin crystals from Long Tao and Li Xian. Lin Yuan could now be said to have formed a triangular long-term cooperative relationship with the Long family's Coiled Dragon Valley and the Li family's Li Yun Yao, Kansas. Therefore, the Long family's Coiled Dragon Valley and the Li family's Li Yun Yao had shown considerable sincerity to Lin Yuan. The Long family's Coiled Dragon Valley had Long Tao deliver 12,540 Law Origin crystals in advance, as well as the Suzerain/Myth 3 Venomous Law crystal that had been agreed upon. This was the first time he had obtained a Law crystal from a Suzerain/Myth 3 Fey. The Law crystal in a Myth 3 Fey was one size bigger than the Law crystal in a Myth 2 Fey. Furthermore, the number of carvings in the Law crystal had also increased from 2 to 3. According to the principle, the stronger the Fey was when it was alive, the brighter the carving inside the Law crystal would be. He carefully checked the brightness of the 3 notches on the Vicious Poison Law crystal with the help of True Data Check. He was certain that this Venomous Law crystal had come from a mid-stage Suzerain 9/Myth 3 Jade-Scaled Heaven-Devouring Python. On the other side, Li Yun Niokang asked Li Xian to bring 6,210 Law Origin crystals and a brocade box of Law crystal fragments. There were also the 2 body transcending memory grasses that Lin Yuan had been looking forward to. When Li Xian had come, Lin Yuan had also taken the opportunity to propose the idea of trading with Li Yun Niaokang for the god-shaped Bodhi fruit. As a result, Li Xian immediately returned to Li Yun Niaokang's mansion in the royal capital and took the god-shaped Bodhi fruit from the Grand Elder's diamond face storage box and handed it to Lin Yuan. Since Lin Yuan had proposed the god-shaped Bodhi fruit, which had a special effect but had no special meaning, Li Xian was very willing to give it to Lin Yuan in order to express his gratitude. Lin Yuan had originally wanted to give Li Xian a pot of golden lotus brocade, but he had not expected Li Xian to refuse it no matter what. Lin Yuan could only give up and remember Li Xian's kindness in his heart. After returning to the Spirit Lock spatial zone, Lin Yuan opened the brocade box that Li Xian had brought and found that it was half filled with law crystal fragments. Lin Yuan tried to grab it with his hand and found that his hand could not grab the law crystal fragments in the brocade box. In addition to the law crystal fragments in Lin Yuan's hand, there was still about 1/5 of the law crystal fragments left in the brocade box. Looking at such a large number of law crystal fragments, Lin Yuan nodded in satisfaction. Regardless of the quality of these law crystal fragments, just the quantity had already far exceeded Lin Yuan's expectations. After being absorbed by Princess Luo Kun, this box of law crystal fragments could give Lin Yuan a return that was far more than 20 times that of the law crystal. It could also provide a variety of complicated laws for Princess Luo Kun's world. This kind of cost-free business simply made Lin Yuan earn a lot of money. After checking the quality of these law crystal fragments, Lin Yuan found that most of them came from different myth breed phase. The law's attributes were abnormally complicated, but not all of them were unorthodox. The law crystal fragments of each type were relatively evenly distributed. Obviously, the Li family had carefully selected them. This was simply great for Lin Yuan. Even if Lin Yuan now had a large number of law origin crystals, it was still not enough to nurture a variety of laws into a world. On the one hand, these chaotic laws could be used as consumables for the Celestial Council to use the Star Spirit Throne after Lin Yuan filtered them. On the other hand, it could also allow Lin Yuan's body to have a low degree of immunity to various elemental attributes, which was also considered an increase in Lin Yuan's strength. After receiving the god-shaped Bodhi fruit from Li Xian, Lin Yuan gave it to Chaimi. He let Chaimi decide when to use the divine movement Bodhi fruit. At first, Lin Yuan thought that Chaimi would eagerly eat the god-shaped Bodhi fruit and go to the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess's live-streaming room to start a live-streaming. However, he did not expect Chaimi to be conflicted after receiving the god-shaped Bodhi fruit. It carefully hid the god-shaped Bodhi fruit in the bird's nest formed by the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree and kept chirping at Genius and Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan, Genius, do you think Chaimi will look good in human form? Lin Yuan, do you think Chaimi should wear the clothes it brought when it transforms into human form or buy a set of clothes suitable for live streaming? Genius, can Chaimi hug you in the live streaming room when it transforms into human form? Chaimi also wants to pet the cat like Lin Yuan. Chaimi's conflict and questions made Genius and Lin Yuan look at each other, not knowing what to say. They could not help but sigh. Is the world of a young bird girl so complicated? When Genius heard Chaimi's last question, it immediately became sluggish. Genius did not expect that Chaimi, which it had treated as a good partner, would actually want to pet it during the live streaming. The second was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 807. Wouldn't it be embarrassing for so many people in the live stream room to see it if it made a gurgling sound during the live stream? During the next few days of nurturing phase, Lin Yuan realized that the conflicted Chaimi had no intention of live streaming at all. Lin Yuan no longer cared about when Chaimi would live stream. Instead, he threw a total of 18,780 law origin crystals to the princess, who had been so happy that she could not find her bearings these past few days. The princess had more than 800 law origin crystals in her hands over the past few days. She was already very happy to be able to enjoy the energy in the law origin crystals. Now that she saw Lin Yuan throw her a total of 18,780 law origin crystals, she was dumbfounded. The princess could not help but count with her fingers. Given the speed at which she consumed the law origin crystals, it would take her nearly a month to absorb them day and night. Eating was a happy thing. Eating was a happy meal. The princess felt that she could completely experience the feeling of eating and being happy all the time in the future. This was simply the ultimate happiness of a sacred source life form. It was simply great to have a contractor that could constantly earn food for her. The princess suddenly had a feeling that she could complete the transformation from infancy to adulthood in a short time. Just as the princess was counting her fingers and giggling, a pair of bony hands appeared in front of her. Between the fingers of this pair of hands was a dark green crystal. Lin Yuan looked at the princess' expression and could not help but feel a little funny. Lin Yuan thought that if the princess was not a sacred source life form and was born in human form, then as a fae, according to her nature, she should be a hamster. Like a little miser who liked to crazily hoard food. With that thought, Lin Yuan was suddenly embarrassed. When it came to hamsters, it seemed that he was not inferior to her and also liked to hoard things. Lin Yuan had always raised the princess as a daughter. At that moment, Lin Yuan silently muttered in his heart. It was really like the old saying, like father, like daughter. With that thought, Lin Yuan felt even more embarrassed. The princess took the Myth 3 Poison Law crystal from Lin Yuan's hand and looked at it. Her mouth twitched slightly. As a sacred source life form, the princess still felt that Law Origin crystals were more in line with her taste. With a feast like the Law Origin crystal, a Myth 3 Law crystal was at most a small snack for the princess. Upon seeing Lin Yuan's embarrassed expression, the princess felt rather conflicted. He felt that he should absorb more rules related to wisdom, knowledge, and enlightenment. This law should make him smarter through Luo Kun's blessing. Lin Yuan didn't know what the princess was thinking, but if he did, he would probably roll his eyes at her. Upon seeing the princess take the Myth 3 Vicious Venom Law crystal, Lin Yuan instructed her. I'll leave this Vicious Poison Law crystal with you for now, but don't absorb it yet. You can absorb it when I let you absorb it in 2 days. The princess nodded upon hearing that. If Lin Yuan had not taken the initiative to instruct her, she would not have absorbed the Law Origin crystals. The princess nodded and casually handed a huge leather bag to Lin Yuan. This leather bag was filled with law crystals the size of a fingernail. The princess had obviously refined them from the Law Origin crystals during this day. Lin Yuan took the bag of law crystals from the princess and prepared to send them to Endless Summer in a while. He wanted Endless Summer to improve her strength as soon as possible. In more than 4 days, Lin Yuan had worked overtime to enhance 400 hot spring snails. These 400 hot spring snails were still the same as before. Lin Yuan first enhanced each of them to Elite/Epic. Then he would choose the best exclusive skills from the 3 after upgrading them to Bronze. In the end, each hot spring snail was upgraded to Bronze X/Epic. As for the 30 jasmine lilies that Lin Yuan had gifted to Indigo Azure City, he had asked Listen to rely on the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's functions to get him 30 pots of low-quality bronze jasmine lilies with the exclusive skill Overheal. The exclusive skill, Overheal, was considered a rare skill among the jasmine lilies. It could stimulate the activity of the jasmine lily's body in a short time, allowing the jasmine lily to quickly send its vitality energy into the target's body through the flower head. His exclusive skill, Excessive Healing, would pump a huge amount of vitality energy into the target's body, and it would inevitably cause unnecessary consumption of vitality energy. However, the jasmine lily, which was also using its exclusive skill, Overheal, had a first aid effect. It could allow the target's vitality to reach its peak within a short period of time. This kind of exclusive skill was very suitable to be used at critical junctures in outdoor battles. It could maximize the chances of snatching a severely injured life from the hands of the Grim Reaper. After dealing with the jasmine lily and the hot spring snail, Lin Yuan stretched his body. He turned to look at Genius and said, "Smart. Have you memorized all the basic combat techniques and movement techniques on Star Web?" Genius meowed when it heard that, then it spoke in a childish voice. "Lin Yuan, Genius has memorized all the basic combat skills and publicly available movement techniques on Star Web. Genius has also integrated these combat skills and movement techniques into a system through data integration. But to be honest, there are so many combat techniques and movement techniques on the Star Web. It's so hard to find them." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan rubbed Genius' little head. While he had been nurturing Phase for the past few days, Genius had searched the entire Star Web for combat techniques and movement techniques. It was really hard for him to be smart. He took out the muscle memory transcending grassroots from the amber button-shaped diamond Phase storage box. After Lin Yuan had obtained the muscle memory grass seedlings, he had gone to the back mountain alone to deal with the muscle memory grassroots in an uninhabited place. As many people in the mansion had drunk the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, the gas emitted by the muscle transcending grass had lost its effect. However, there were many Phase in the manor that hadn't been cleansed of their impurities. Therefore, the gas emitted by the muscle memory herbs seedling had a great impact on the Phase in the mansion. Lin Yuan didn't want the angelfish of bliss in the hidden WRM lake, which had just been constructed, to collectively flip over tomorrow. He put a muscle memory herb's root into his mouth, chewed it, and swallowed it while enduring the bitterness. The impurities in his body and soul had been cleansed. Thus he did not feel the slightest discomfort. At that instant all the muscle cells in his body became restless. The third one. End of chapter. Chapter 808. In an instant, Lin Yuan received the massive amount of knowledge from Genius's mind. The knowledge was imprinted in Lin Yuan's mind through the interconnection tail. At that moment, Lin Yuan's body started to crazily engrave and memorize the combat skills and movement techniques that appeared in his mind. During the half an hour when Lin Yuan's body entered the interconnection tail, his body had memorized all the combat skills and movement techniques on Star Web. This allowed Lin Yuan to subconsciously use these movement techniques to counterattack when defending or attacking. If Lin Yuan knew nothing about martial arts before, he could now be described as a martial arts master. However, Lin Yuan's seemingly shortcut was a miracle that could not be replicated. First of all, he needed to get the silver stamen gold luster kasha nectar from the Radiant Moon Palace to remove the impurities in his body and soul. Just this point alone had stumped many people. The second requirement was to obtain the root of the flesh memory grass, a heaven and earth spirit treasure. The flesh memory grass was a heaven and earth spirit treasure unique to the Li family. Therefore, in order to obtain the muscle transcending memory herb, he had to obtain Li Yun Nioking's approval. If Lin Yuan had not been able to take out the golden lotus brocade plant and the law crystal, even if he had relied on his identity as the Moon Empress disciple, the Li family would not have given him the muscle transcending grass, which was used to nurture flying phase. The third point was Genius's exclusive skill, the interconnection tail. Actually, compared to the other 2 points, the third point was the rarest. When Genius had become a fantasy breed, it had transformed into the interconnection beast and created the first 100 questions beast. The interconnection tail's power did not only lie in the exchange of knowledge. It mainly relied on Genius's photographic memory, which allowed it to gather all the world's knowledge into its mind. Without the third point, even if someone reached the first 2 points, Genius was the only one in the world. It was impossible to learn such comprehensive combat skills and movement techniques within half an hour of muscle transcending memory. After Lin Yuan's body exited muscle transcending memory, he suddenly felt that the entire world had changed. Due to the change in his body's ability, Lin Yuan felt that his body was dozens of times more agile than before. Lin Yuan immediately turned the amber button-shaped source sand into quicksand and let it throw the sand at him at a rate of 10 pieces per second. In the past, Lin Yuan would not have been able to dodge the sand grains thrown at such a frequency. Now, when he saw these sand grains, his body would subconsciously move. With a twist and turn, he elegantly dodged all the sand grains that were hurled at him. This feeling made Lin Yuan's heart feel carefree. This ability to react to attacks was exactly what Lin Yuan wanted. Although Lin Yuan's physical strength had not improved much, just the improvements in his combat skills and movement techniques were enough for him to use Spirit Purity Burst to execute perfect attacks. Even if Spirit Chi professionals were Emperor-class experts, they would still be the weakest link in the defense system. By relying on his combat skills, movement techniques, and Spirit Purity Burst, he had unknowingly made up for his shortcomings as a Spirit Chi professional. However, Lin Yuan was not satisfied with this. Lin Yuan first stored 100 golden lotus brocade stalks from the 120-plus pots of golden lotus brocade stalks that Jin Se had nurtured into the Diamond Fei storage box. He then carried Genius toward the Radiant Moon Palace on the Leaning Moon Mountain. On the way to the Radiant Moon Palace, Lin Yuan contacted Duan He and arranged to meet him in a restaurant in the royal capital. Lin Yuan gave Duan He a bag of law crystals that he had prepared for endless summer and the phase that he had nurtured for the Indigo Azure Guards. If it had been in the past, Lin Yuan would have kept this batch of Indigo Azure City's goods for at least 2 months before handing it over to Duan He to prevent others from being surprised by the Creation Master resources he had. Now that Lin Yuan had decided to reveal his identity as the Moon Empress disciple, he would give 400 bronze/epic hot spring snails and 30 bronze/epic jasmine lilies to Duan He within an hour. Duan He would only be surprised and would not think too much. Lin Yuan knew that there was a combat readiness room in the Radiant Moon Palace's treasure vault, which stored a large number of concocted spirit liquids. There were nearly 10,000 bottles of each type of spirit liquids. Any random bottle of the lowest grade among these spirit liquids could create a bronze/epic fey. Some of the Class 5 spirit liquids in the combat readiness room could even instantly create a bronze/legend fey or allow a diamond X/fantasy V fey stuck at suzerain to welcome the world cleansing. After handing over the goods with Duan He, Lin Yuan used the ethereal jellyfish's node tentacles to teleport to the Radiant Moon Palace's entrance. When he arrived at the entrance, he happened to meet the Moon Empress. Mystic Moon and Cold Moon were walking out of the palace. Upon seeing them, Lin Yuan hurriedly greeted them. Cold Moon and Mystic Moon bowed slightly when they saw Lin Yuan and greeted him. "Greetings, young lord." Lin Yuan responded, "Uncle Mystic, Aunt Cold Moon." Lin Yuan did not expect Mystic Moon to return from the outer realms so soon. However, Lin Yuan felt that the Mystic Moon he saw this time was a little different from before. At this moment, Mystic Moon's body would inadvertently emit a trace of terrifying pressure. Lin Yuan had heard his master, the Moon Empress, mention that Mystic Moon was a fae. It seemed that Mystic Moon had just advanced, and her body was not proficient in controlling the strength that had just increased. When the Moon Empress saw Lin Yuan, her face revealed a trace of a gentle smile. She took 2 steps forward and helped Lin Yuan tidy his collar. When she saw the flowing cloud beeswax pendant on Lin Yuan's neck, the Moon Empress' smile on her face became even wider. Cold Moon looked at Lin Yuan with a flash of astonishment in her eyes. The news of the Golden Lotus brocade appearing in the royal capital's Fae Observer Guild had already spread throughout the royal capital. It had even attracted the attention of the other 2 Class 5 creation masters, Chef Supreme and Bamboo Monarch. Just these few days alone, there were no less than 30 factions that had come to the Leaning Moon Mountain to visit the Moon Empress and request for a Golden Lotus brocade. Cold Moon knew that this commotion had nothing to do with the Moon Empress. It was all caused by Lin Yuan, the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord. This also meant that the Golden Lotus brocade, which was said to be able to change the structure of Creation Masters' factions, was the young lord's exclusive secret recipe. Cold Moon had always been certain of Lin Yuan's strength as a combat class spirit chi professional, but she did not expect Lin Yuan's strength as a creation master to have such a huge improvement in just half a year. Although Cold Moon had not personally seen the Golden Lotus brocade, she was not sure if it was as incredible as the rumors said. However, since so many factions had come to visit the Leaning Moon Mountain for the Golden Lotus brocade, it must be extraordinary. Such an item was not something that ordinary creation masters could nurture. The first was even more terrifying. End of this chapter. Chapter 809. At that moment, Cold Moon saw Lin Yuan pass a cloud-shaped diamond face storage box to the Moon Empress. This action slightly startled Sangyu. Not only was Sangyu stunned, but even the Moon Empress and Shenyu, who had just returned from the outer realm, were stunned. Mystic Moon, who had just returned to the Radiant Moon Palace, was puzzled. In the past, it was always the Moon Empress who thought of all sorts of ways to send gifts to the young lord. Since when did the young lord start to send gifts to the Moon Empress? The Moon Empress originally wanted to reject him subconsciously, but when she saw his solemn expression, she recalled how she had felt when he had rejected her gift. The Moon Empress reached out and received the cloud-shaped diamond face storage box. After receiving the cloud-shaped diamond face storage box, the Moon Empress immediately checked its contents. With one look, the Moon Empress was astonished at first, but she then revealed a smile. In the end, his smile turned into pride and amazement. The Moon Empress didn't expect that her disciple had actually grown to such an extent unknowingly. The Moon Empress, who was in the diamond face storage box, immediately saw through it. It could be said that the Golden Lotus brocade stock that Lin Yuan had given the Moon Empress could be considered a precious treasure to her. At that moment, the Moon Empress had a subtle feeling in her heart. It was as if something that he had carefully nurtured and cared for had grown up and didn't need him as much anymore. The stubborn little fellow in front of her was actually able to repay her despite not accepting her help. This was the first time in the Moon Empress' life that such a feeling had occurred. Melancholy, pride and pride. It was as if the torch of inheritance had been passed down from his hands. It was a feeling of passing on the torch. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan and smiled. Master likes the items in this diamond face storage box very much. Master is going to Night Dawn Palace with Dark Moon and Cold Moon. Why don't you send me off and follow me to the Moon Stable? Mystic Moon and Cold Moon did not know what was in the diamond face storage box that Lin Yuan had handed to the Moon Empress. However, when he heard that the Moon Empress wanted to bring Lin Yuan to the Moon Stable, his eyes immediately lit up. He knew that the Moon Empress was going to gift the Fae that she had meticulously prepared for the young lord's Fae carriage. When Mystic Moon recalled the Fae that the Moon Empress had prepared for Lin Yuan's Fae carriage, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. At that moment, Mystic Moon could not help but imagine how the Fae that the Moon Empress had prepared for Lin Yuan would look like when it pulled the chariot. Upon hearing the Moon Empress' words, Lin Yuan turned around and followed her. Let's go, Master. I'll send you off. He had always been unimpeded in the Radiant Moon Palace and could even freely enter and exit the Radiant Moon Palace's core moonlight corridor. The Moon Empress had also built a breeding room for him in the Moonlight Corridor. After the question and answer session with the Moon Empress, he would always go to the breeding room in the Moonlight Corridor to organize the knowledge he had learned. When Lin Yuan saw the Moon Empress's arrangement for him in the breeding room for the first time, he could not help but click his tongue. The walls of the entire breeding room were inlaid with large pieces of spirit-permeating wood. Even if a Class 4 creation master worked diligently day and night and accumulated resources for around 10 years, they would only be able to purchase a piece of spirit-permeating wood that was half the size of a fist. The spirit-permeating wood had great benefits for creation masters as it could purify spirit chi. However, a luxury like the spirit-permeating wood was of no use to Lin Yuan. Such an arrangement was enough to show the Moon Empress care for him. Lin Yuan was very familiar with the Radiant Moon Palace, but he had not strolled around the entire Leaning Moon Mountain forest. At most, he would walk from the Radiant Moon Palace to the pavilion where he usually lived or go to Chu Xi's residence in the Radiant Moon Palace to look for her. The Moon Stable was where the Radiant Moon Palace stored the Fey carriages, and Lin Yuan had never been to such a place. However, after seeing Li Xian's Fey carriage and the Long family's patriarch's Long Tu's Fey carriage, Lin Yuan liked Fey carriages more and more. Lin Yuan was already thinking about what kind of Fey to prepare for his Fey carriage. However, the choice of Fey was not an easy matter. First, he had to consider the protective effect of the Fey carriage. In fact, it was the shielding effect of the Fey carriage's internal environment and the Fey's strength. Finally, he had to consider whether the Fey carriage could be eye-catching. There were so many points that he had to consider one by one, so Lin Yuan did not have a clue at the moment. Therefore, Lin Yuan was rather curious about the Fey carriage in the Leaning Moon Mountain's Moon Stable. He followed the Moon Empress all the way and looked at the scenery of the Leaning Moon Mountain and the precious Feys everywhere, making Lin Yuan feel very satisfied. It had been some time since the new year. It had turned warm and cold, and the season had turned from midwinter to early spring. In this early spring, the Leaning Moon Mountain was filled with the fragrance of sprouts, which made one feel as though their spirit was being comforted. When they arrived at the Moon Stable, Lin Yuan found two huge figures completely hidden under the moonlight robes standing at the entrance. These two huge figures were 3 meters tall. Just by looking at them, Lin Yuan could be sure that the people under the moonlight robes were not human spirit chi professionals. Instead, they were abnormally huge Feys that had taken human form. When the two huge figures saw the Moon Empress, they knelt on one knee and bowed to Lin Yuan. However, Lin Yuan keenly noticed that the two huge figures did not bow to Cold Moon and Mystic Moon. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard his master, the Moon Empress, speak. "Go and get Ling Hanua's carriage out. This time the two of you will follow me to Yiyang Palace." As the Moon Empress spoke, Lin Yuan felt a little strange. Fey carriages had always been pulled by Feys. But why did his master, the Moon Empress, let these two huge figures hidden under the moonlight robes pull the Fey carriage out? At the thought of this, Lin Yuan was alarmed, and he suddenly looked at the two massive figures kneeling on the ground. Lin Yuan saw the two huge figures raise their heads and let out a hissing sound similar to that of a snake Fey. However, these two hisses were different from the vicious and tyrannical hisses of ordinary snake Feys. These two snake-like hisses were filled with an indescribable immortal chi. When the two huge figures raised their heads and hissed, Lin Yuan realized that the figures hidden under the moon-colored robes actually had two beautiful and otherworldly faces. Immediately after, he saw one of the figures rush into the sky like a ball of blazing moonlight and turn into a giant white snake that stretched for nearly 1,000 meters. Another figure followed closely behind, turning into a giant green snake that stretched for nearly 1,000 meters in the sky. Lin Yuan's pupils constricted, and he subconsciously used Morbius True Data to check the white and green giant snakes. Yesterday's second night watch. The third night watch will be very late. Everyone sleep early. Today's modification is a little late. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:10. At a glance, he realized that when he used True Data to check on the white and green giant snakes, he had already noticed that they were True Data. When he had just contracted Morbius, he had checked on Auntie Zhang's dying fantasy breed Terror Rabbit. He could not see their data at all. The only thing he could see was that they had 3 exclusive skills. This made Lin Yuan understand that the 2 giant snakes, which were thousands of meters long, were 2 creation breed Feys. Immediately after, he saw 2 energy chains extend from the 2 giant snakes' heads. The 2 chains opened the door of the moon stable with the force of a thunderbolt. The green and white energy chains entered the moon stable and shook. A tower-shaped building engraved with moon totems was dragged out of the moon stable. The tower-shaped building was engraved with moon totems, and the moon totems were embedded with a large number of moonlight stones. The entire tower-shaped building was like a place of frost that pierced through the vast sky above the 9 heavens. After the tower-shaped building was thrown high into the sky by the green and white energy chains, the green and white giant snakes surged with energy. A long dorsal fin suddenly appeared on the snake's smooth spine, followed by 2 pairs of huge wings. The wings were translucent like the fins of a fish, and when they flapped, the sky seemed to tilt. When Lin Yuan saw the fin-shaped wings on the 2 giant snakes, he immediately knew that these 2 creation breeds had the soaring serpent bloodline. The soaring serpent bloodline was the apex of a branch of the snake species Fey bloodline. In terms of bloodline nobility, the soaring serpent bloodline was comparable to the top few bloodlines that were main dragon species and main phoenix species Feys. In terms of bloodline, it would crush most of the main dragon species Feys and main phoenix species Feys. Lin Yuan saw the back half of the green and white snakes, which were 1,000 meters long, coiled with each other. As they coiled, the snake body was like a base that firmly caught the moonlight pagoda connected to the green and white energy chain. The dorsal fins of the coiled snake body extended outwards, like a blooming 2-colored lotus throne. Looking at the Moon Empress Fey carriage, Lin Yuan had a new understanding of Fey carriages. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard his master, the Moon Empress, say to him, "This cold moon pagoda carriage is a Fey carriage that can represent the Radiant Moon Palace. Disciple, if you want to represent the Radiant Moon Palace in the future, just tell White Moon and Blue Moon. On the Leaning Moon Mountain you and I are no different." When Lin Yuan heard that, he immediately knew that his master, the Moon Empress, was referring to the fact that he could also drive the cold moon pagoda carriage. However, he really felt a little pressured to let 2 creation breed Feys pull his carriage. At that moment, the Moon Empress handed him a diamond Fey storage box. Lin Yuan hurriedly reached out and took the diamond Fey storage box. After receiving the Fey storage box, the Moon Empress spoke again. "When you don't wish to represent the Radiant Moon Palace, you will need your own Fey carriage. See if the Fey in this Fey storage box can be used to pull your Fey carriage." Just as Lin Yuan was about to check the items in the diamond Fey storage box, he heard the Moon Empress chuckle and say softly, "Don't worry. Summon the items in the diamond Fey storage box." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan didn't use his spiritual energy to check the items in the diamond Fey storage box. Instead, he summoned the items in the diamond Fey storage box. Immediately after, 12 fist-sized water balls hovered beside Lin Yuan. Upon seeing these 12 fist-sized water balls, Lin Yuan couldn't help but be a little surprised. When Mystic Moon saw the 12 water balls that Lin Yuan summoned, her eyes immediately widened. It could be said that the Moon Empress had prepared Feys for Lin Yuan to pull the carriage because Mystic Moon had informed her. The Moon Empress wanted to prepare a lot of things for Lin Yuan. If Mystic Moon hadn't mentioned the Fey carriage, the Moon Empress would probably have wanted to add some life-saving trump cards for Lin Yuan and not these Feys that could pull the carriage. However, what puzzled Mystic Moon was that the items that the Moon Empress was giving Lin Yuan were not the Feys that she had prepared to pull the carriage. When Mystic Moon took a closer look at these 12 water balls, her eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Mystic Moon never expected that the Moon Empress would actually give something like the Source Movement Water to Lin Yuan. When Lin Yuan saw these 12 water balls, the Moon Empress, who was enjoying the sacred source crystal in the Spirit Lock spatial zone, suddenly became restless. Her restlessness was far greater than when Lin Yuan had just obtained the Law Source Crystal. It was just like Red Thorn's restlessness when it had discovered the Source Seed. But soon Lin Yuan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. The Moon Empress was so restless because she was coveting these 12 water balls. According to the Moon Empress feedback, Lin Yuan knew that these 12 water balls didn't have the same function as the Source Seed, which could transform Red Thorn. However, compared to the Law Source Crystal, these 12 water balls could allow the Moon Empress to grow faster. After absorbing these 12 water balls, the Moon Empress might even transform from the infancy stage to the growth stage. Her Moon Empress form and Sacred Sword form would unlock the second function together. At the same time, Lin Yuan knew what these 12 water balls were based on his communication with the Moon Empress. However, it was also because of Lin Yuan that he knew what these 12 water masses were, even though they could greatly increase the princess's star class. Lin Yuan would never leave these 12 water balls for the princess to harm. Just as Lin Yuan was surprised by the origin of these 12 water masses, the Moon Empress said, "That's right. When the Sacred Source life form reaches the 7-star stage, even if the contractor dies, as long as the Sacred Source life form and the contractor did not form a marrow contract, the Sacred Source life form will still be able to survive. Sacred Source life forms can survive by returning to their infancy stage through star fall. After killing a Sacred Source life form that has escaped its contractor, the sacred source life form will usually retain some of its own functions and laws. You already know that a sacred source life form's shell can be made into a treasure in the hands of a Class 5 creation master. Actually, after a sacred source life form dies, it can use a law crystal that contains pure power of the law as a medium to induce a portion of the sacred source life form's laws and functions for nurturing. The 12 blobs of water in front of you are a sacred source life form contracted by a member of the Freedom Federation. Back then, this person's sacred source life form reached 9 stars and was one step away from reaching its complete form. It's just that this person and the sacred source life form are at odds because they haven't formed a marrow contract. That's why they have been unable to work together. To allow the sacred source life form to advance toward its complete form. Back then, I used the totem moon to sublimate that person, and I killed the sacred source life form after it escaped. These 12 water balls were nurtured by extracting the laws and functions from that person's sacred source life form, the origin water. Cold Moon and Mystic Moon took a deep breath. They did not expect the Moon Empress to mention the incident from 10 years ago to the young lord at this time. Yesterday's third night. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:11. Since the Moon Empress was willing to mention this matter, it meant that the Moon Empress had truly let go of this matter. Lin Yuan's eyes widened in shock when he heard the Moon Empress words. It was already extremely difficult for Her Highness to evolve from 1 star to 2 star. It was as though she had consumed so many law crystals for nothing. Although he didn't know how the sacred source life form's star level increased, it shouldn't be easy for sacred source life forms to increase their star level. According to Her Highness' senses, these 12 water masses were filled with a special water elemental energy. The sacred source life form, origin moving water, should be a water elemental sacred source life form. However, Lin Yuan was a little confused. Wasn't the Moon Empress a fae that pulled a carriage? What was the use of giving me 12 water masses? At present, Lin Yuan's True Data could not examine these 12 water masses. Under True Data's examination, the 12 water masses' names were origin moving water remnant bodies and not living phase. Suddenly Lin Yuan felt the Moon Empress aura change. She took out 12 blue crystals and threw them into the 12 water masses. Then Lin Yuan was surprised to find that these 12 water masses had complete attributes under True Data. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan's expression as he looked at the 12 water masses and explained softly, "Disciple, you have already contracted a sacred source life form. Disciple, you have already formed a contract with a sacred source life form. This kind of fae cultivated from the remnants of a sacred source life form requires the sacred source life form that you have formed a marrow contract with through your soul. No matter how you nurture these 12 water masses in the future, they will be useful to you." Lin Yuan was already looking at the 12 water masses under True Data, and his heart was thumping violently. These 12 blobs of water had boundless potential, and there were many ways to cultivate them. After being nurtured, it could be used as a supreme weapon or as a heavy shield. However, Lin Yuan could also nurture these 12 water masses with strategic significance. He looked at the Moon Empress' eyes. Lin Yuan stored the 12 water masses into the diamond face storage box and wore the ring-shaped diamond face storage box on his finger. At that moment, Mystic Moon, who was standing at the side, suddenly saw the Moon Empress give him a look. "Moon Empress, fays nurtured with origin movement water are not suitable for pulling fey carriages," the Moon Empress said. "Do you think you should prepare a few fays suitable for pulling the fey carriage for His Highness?" Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress hurriedly handed another platinum fey storage box to Lin Yuan and gave Mystic Moon an appreciative look. "Disciple, you don't have to worry about these 12 balls of source water. You can slowly cultivate them." However, these 12 balls of source moving water are really like Mystic Moon's. They are indeed not suitable for pulling the fey carriage. "Disciple, take a look at the fays in this platinum fey storage box. How about matching them with the comprehension carriage?" Lin Yuan looked at the Moon Empress' expression and immediately knew that she was thinking of ways to give him something. This time Lin Yuan didn't hesitate and took it. Previously, Lin Yuan didn't want the Moon Empress items because he wanted to be firm on the path he wanted to take and didn't want to rely on the Moon Empress too much. It wasn't that he couldn't accept the Moon Empress things. Now that Endless Summer and the Mother of Bloodbath had become creation breeds in Lin Yuan's private faction, it was a done deal. He had also given the Moon Empress an answer through the Golden Lotus brocade plant. Lin Yuan, who was firm on his path, no longer refused to accept the Moon Empress items because he believed that one day, he would be able to help his master, the Moon Empress, just like how the Moon Empress had nurtured him. Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't return the items after accepting one item like before, the Moon Empress expression immediately softened. The Moon Empress expression, which had turned slightly cold due to mentioning the past, immediately softened. He looked at the Fey storage box in Platinum's hand and found that there were 12 Diamond X/Fantasy V fragrant mices in it. This made Lin Yuan subconsciously wonder if the butterfly pulling the carriage was too eye-catching. However, Lin Yuan immediately realized that he was thinking too much. Even if the fragrance plugs reached Diamond X/Fantasy V, they were still palm-sized. How could they pull the carriage? Really, the fragrance plugs were good stuff. If Lin Yuan were to nurture them himself, he wouldn't be able to do so no matter what. If he wanted to nurture the fragrance plugs, he would need to let the fragrance plugs devour a large amount of soul-type spiritual ingredients when they were still caterpillars. This would strengthen the fragrance plug's soul as a soul-type Fae. After devouring a large amount of soul-type spiritual ingredients to form a cocoon, the fragrance plugs would need to develop in an environment with extremely rich spirit qi. Lin Yuan could easily do the second point and could even do it better. However, the first point left Lin Yuan in the dust. The only soul-type spiritual ingredient Lin Yuan currently had was the cold snow pine incense, which was calcined from cold snow pine branches. Lin Yuan had a lot of cold snow pine incense, but it wasn't enough for the 12 fragrance plugs caterpillars. This showed how many soul-type spiritual ingredients the Moon Empress had used to nurture these 12 fragrance plugs. Even a little bit of soul-type spiritual ingredients was priceless. The fragrance plugs ranked second among all butterfly species Fays in terms of appearance, second only to the blue light goddess butterfly, which had evolved from the blue flash butterfly. Like the blue light goddess butterfly, the fragrance plugs weren't good at attacking. However, the fragrance plugs were very good at releasing cherry petal-like scale powder to carry out a comprehensive information blockade within the range of the scale powder. At the same time, unlike the blue light goddess butterfly that relied on its appearance, the fragrance plugs had the innate ability of soul detention as a soul-type Fae. The fragrance plugs could detain Fays with lower soul strength. The stronger the Fae's soul strength, the shorter the fragrance plug's soul detention time. During the process of soul detention, the fragrance plugs could control the detained Fae's body at will, but once the time was over, the Fae would be out of the fragrance plug's control. The Fae that was controlled by the fragrance plugs would have a strong resistance to the fragrance plug's soul detention, making it difficult for the fragrance plugs to control a target twice. However, the fragrance plug's soul detention had a special feature. It could permanently detain insects with lower soul strength. The insects that were permanently detained by the fragrance plugs would be like subjects that surrendered to Mei Rao's skirt and willingly offered themselves. If the fragrance plug's soul strength became stronger, the fragrance plugs would have better choices. It could order the poor insects that were previously detained to commit suicide, thereby removing the target of the soul detention and controlling other insects. At that thought, Lin Yuan immediately made a decision. Chapter 8:12. Given the Diamond X/Fantasy V Heavenly Fragrance Beauty Butterfly Soul Strength, even suzerain/myth-eye insect species Fays might be able to be subdued. There were not only insect species Fays, but alien insects were also considered a major type of insect species lifeforms. There were many high-grade alien insects with extremely domineering appearances. At the same time as dimensional lifeforms, alien insects' soul strength was far lower than insect species Fays of the same strength. It was easy for the Diamond X/Fantasy V Heavenly Fragrance Beauty Butterfly to control the alien insects, which were equivalent to suzerain/myth-eye Fays. It was even possible to control Class 8 alien insects that were equivalent to suzerain/myth-2 Fays. Lin Yuan was simply too greedy for the Class 8 Imperial Armored Martial God insect. The Imperial Armored Martial God insect looked very much like a transformer covered in insect armor. When it fought, the insect armor would skillfully combine into all kinds of weapons. The Imperial Armored Martial God insect relied on its sharp and hard insect armor to contend with most Myth-2 Fays that had comprehended laws. Under normal circumstances, the alien insect dimensional lifeform's combat power was far lower than that of other dimensional lifeforms of the same grade. However, the Imperial Armored Martial God insect's combat power was abnormal among Class 8 dimensional lifeforms. It relied on its insect armor and amazing strength to fight evenly with the Scythe-Horn demons, which were outstanding Class 8 demons. It even seized the initiative and could suppress the Scythe-Horn demons. It was just like the Class 3 alien insect, the heart-penetrating iron line, to dimensional lifeforms of the same grade. If he could use the 12 Heavenly Fragrance Beauty Butterflies to control 12 Class 8 Imperial Armored Martial God insects, which were equivalent to suzerain/myth-2 Fays, and then build the Fey carriage into a sharp metal style with sharp edges. It would definitely be very cool when paired with the strange combination of the heavenly fragrance beauty butterfly and the imperial armored martial god insects. However, as cool as it was difficult for Lin Yuan to obtain the imperial armored martial god insects. Class 8 Alien Insect Emperor Armored Martial Divine Insects would only appear in alien insect dimensional rifts of Class 4 and above. Compared to ordinary insects that lived in groups, the Emperor Armored Martial God Insect was a lone ranger through and through. They spent their entire lives killing and fighting. Even if there were a large number of Class 8 alien insects in the insect tide spewing out from a dimensional rift, they might not be able to find the Imperial Armored Martial Divine Insect among them. After all, the Imperial Armored Martial God Insects were not the only species of 8 extreme alien insects that had spewed out of the dimensional rift. When people don't need anything, these things often come to them at will. When he really needed something and went out of his way to find it, he often couldn't find it no matter how hard he searched. If he was really unlucky, even if he controlled a Class 4 alien insect dimensional rift and waited at the dimensional hub, he wouldn't be able to survive. If they waited for the alien insects to surge out of the dimensional hub, they might not even see a single Emperor Armored Martial God insect even if they waited for a few months. Furthermore, given his current strength, he was not strong enough to explore the Class 4 alien insect dimensional rift. Although the Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly was a Diamond X/Fantasy V Fae, its strength lay in its ability to enslave other Faes with its soul. The interior of the alien insect dimensional rift could be said to be the Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly's paradise. Each Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly could control a powerful alien insect through soul enslavement. If they didn't want to control a single insect life form, they could easily use soul enslavement to control an entire sea of insects. However, the Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly could only change targets after the enslaved Fae died. Once the Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly's enslaved alien insects were careless, or if it encountered other powerful alien insects, it wouldn't be able to make its enslaved alien insects commit suicide in time. A fragile and precious Fae like the Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterfly was very likely to perish in the Class 4 dimensional rift. This was what Lin Yuan didn't want to see no matter what. Suddenly Lin Yuan had an idea. He recalled that Long Tu had said in his Return from Faraway Manor that the Long family controlled several Class 4 dimensional rifts. While nurturing dragon species phase through these Class 4 dimensional rifts, they had also collected a massive amount of Law Origin crystals. The Law Origin crystals condensed in different high-level dimensional lifeforms were different. For example, the Law Origin crystals condensed in the bodies of high-level alien insects that were comparable to myth-breed Faes had the unique aura of the alien insects and were easy to distinguish. 1/3 of the 10,000 Law Origin crystals that Long Tao had brought him came from alien insects. This meant that the Class 4 dimensional rift controlled by the Long family would not have a small number of alien insects. High-grade alien insects were just for nurturing dragon species Faes and didn't have much use for them. If he proposed to the Long family to trade for a living Imperial Armored Martial God insect, the Long family would have no reason to refuse. With this thought, Lin Yuan felt that his idea of driving 12 Imperial Armored Martial God insects to pull the Fae carriage was likely to come true. The reason why Lin Yuan was so greedy for the Class 8 Imperial Armored Martial God insects was because he had seen an illustration on the wall of the Royal Capital's Fae Observer Guild's president, Lan Qin. On the wall of Lan Qin's observation room was an Imperial Armored Martial God insect. The insect armor on its body flowed to its back and finally formed 3 sets of complex insect armor. The 3 sets of insect armor spread out on the Imperial Armored Martial God insect's back like 3 pairs of steel wings. In this form, the Imperial Armored Martial God insect was like an invincible 6-winged steel-winged slaughter angel. Moreover, the Imperial Armored Martial God insect's combat power could protect the Fae carriage to the greatest extent and increase the Fae carriage's safety. After all, the best defense was to immediately annihilate the enemy when it discovered them. Lin Yuan raised his head and smiled at his master, the Moon Empress, revealing his small white teeth. "Master, I like these 12 Heaven Fragrance Beauty Butterflies very much." The Moon Empress was in a great mood when she heard Lin Yuan's words. At that moment, she seemed to finally feel a trace of happiness as a master for the sake of her disciple. After giving Lin Yuan some instructions, the Moon Empress stood in the air with Cold Moon and Mystic Moon and entered the Moonlight Pagoda, which was held up by the 2 giant green and white snakes. After watching Ling Hanyue's carriage go far away, Lin Yuan turned and headed for the Hidden Moon Pavilion. He was going to check the Hidden Moon Pavilion's 72nd floor to the 87th floor, which contained a total of 15 floors combat skills and movement techniques. The combat skills and movement techniques recorded in the Hidden Moon Pavilion were completely incomparable to those published on the Star Web. The Radiant Moon Palace's Hidden Moon Pavilion's combat skills and movement techniques were all legacies from before the Spirit Chi Awakening. With the Spirit Chi Awakening, many of the combat skills and movement techniques from before the Spirit Chi Awakening had disappeared in the torrent of time. Apart from the Hidden Moon Pavilion, there was probably no other place in the world that could collect such comprehensive combat skills and movement techniques. Lin Yuan arrived at the Hidden Moon Pavilion's 72nd floor without any obstructions and immediately summoned Genius. The second floor was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:13. Lin Yuan said to Genius, "Genius, let's use one day to record all the combat skills and movement techniques on the 15 floors of the Hidden Moon Pavilion." Genius said with a meow as it looked at the hundreds of bookshelves on this floor that were filled with ancient books. Woo woo woo, Genius remembers things very quickly, but Genius isn't able to flip through these books quickly. Genius felt that it wouldn't be able to flip through 20 bookshelves in a day even if it relied on its little paws to flip through the books non-stop. Lin Yuan rubbed Genius' little head and took out a star web card from a box placed on the 72nd floor of the Hidden Moon Pavilion's altar. The Hidden Moon Pavilion's information and ancient books might be placed on the bookshelves in the form of physical books, but the information was already backed up on the star web. When Genius saw Lin Yuan taking out the star web card, its eyes lit up and it spoke in a childish voice. If this is on the star web, even if Genius is 10 times more intelligent, it will only take half an hour to memorize, analyze and organize the information. Thus, Lin Yuan and Genius started to take a star web card placed on the offering table on each floor of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Genius then logged into the star web and quickly memorized the combat techniques and movement techniques in every level of the manuals. After Genius memorized all 15 floors, Lin Yuan consumed the muscle supermemory herbs root like before. With Genius' exclusive skill, the interconnection tail, Lin Yuan's body cells entered the supermemory state again. He memorized the 15 floors of the Hidden Moon Pavilion's collection of complex combat skills and movement techniques. Half an hour later, Lin Yuan recovered from the supermemory state and reached out to clench his fist. Lin Yuan activated Blackie's exclusive skill, Spirit Essence Burst, and a ball of Spirit Chi Veil that looked like a flame was attached to Lin Yuan's fist. Lin Yuan realized that after learning these complex combat skills and movement techniques, his body's control over the minute details had reached the acme of perfection. Under such circumstances, Lin Yuan's control over the Spirit Essence Burst had increased. After all, the circulation of Spirit Chi in the body had an extremely strong auxiliary effect. Lin Yuan was now considered to have completely and perfectly integrated with Blackie's exclusive skill, Spirit Essence Burst, allowing him to freely use it in battle. He had perfectly unleashed the maximum damage that his Spirit Essence Burst could deal. This was also one of Lin Yuan's trump cards to compete for the championship in the Nix Assembly's civil and martial arena. Just as he was about to return to the mansion, Lu Jie, who had been staying in the land of spirit suppression, opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Night Leaning Moon standing beside him, protecting him. Lu Jie hurriedly said, "Master, my insect queen has already devoured and absorbed these 7 insect-type carcinoma phase. It has also used the insect queen's genes to create new insect-type carcinoma phase. I can now freely control these 7 insect species carcinoma phase." As he spoke, Lu Jie could not help but sigh. He was truly blessed after surviving a great disaster. The insect queen that Lin Yuan had rescued had fused with the Blade Queen Bee's mental toxin and had undergone a positive mutation. From this mental toxin, the insect queen bee had obtained an ability unique to the Blade Queen Bee, which was its control over blade worms. However, the blade worms that the insect queen bee controlled were not the same as the Blade Queen Bees. Blade worms were just a general concept. According to this mental toxin, the insect queen could control any insect-type carcinoma phase. It treated the insect-type carcinoma phase as blade worms and controlled them. Even the Blade Queen Bee, which had promoted the insect queen bee's mutation, immediately became an insect-type carcinoma phase under the insect queen bee's control after the mutation was completed. A carcinoma phase like the Blade Queen Bee could be considered a disaster on the battlefield. However, Lu Jie's insect queen now controlled a total of 8 types of destructive war weapons like the Blade Queen Bee. Night Leaning Moon nodded in response. Her face was covered by a black veil, and her expression could not be seen. However, from the corner of her eyes, it could be seen that Night Leaning Moon was rather impressed with Lu Jie's growth. As expected, you have realized the plan that I suggested to you previously. This time, the Insect Queen has controlled 7 insect-type carcinoma phase. In addition to the Blade Queen Bee that the Insect Queen Bee automatically controls after completing its mutation, you now have 8 insect-type carcinoma phase under your control. This is just the beginning. For the past 1,000 years, the spirit guards have taken in close to 1,000 types of insect-type carcinoma phase, especially during the time when the spirit chi is thin. When your Insect Queen's spiritual energy increases a little more, I will pick out some more insect-type carcinoma phase for you. In the future you can let the Insect Queen control even more insect-type carcinoma phase. Each insect-type carcinoma phase is a unique weapon, and your Insect Queen will be the arsenal that contains these weapons. However, you must not use your sacred source life form. Treat your sacred source life form as your ultimate weapon. Hearing this, Lu Jie smiled and nodded in response. Don't worry, Master. I will do my best to fight for a spot in the Great Night Assembly's martial arena. Night Leaning Moon immediately said, Master, don't worry. This time, the Great Night Assembly is holding the civil arena, martial arena, and civil and martial arena, but it is not my intention. It is mainly because the other old guys want to see the strength of the top faction's younger generation. The civil arena's reward is a soon-to-be hatched island whale. Lu Jie's heart trembled when he heard about the civil arena's reward. He never expected the civil arena's reward to be a soon-to-be hatched island whale. Even a strategic resource like the island whale would be publicly displayed on the card as a reward. Just based on this reward alone, one could imagine how intense the fight for the civil arena's champion would be. The martial arena was on par with the civil arena, so the reward should not be too bad. As for the civil and martial arena, which was even more valuable than the civil and martial arenas, the all-rounder arena, Lu Jie did not have time to guess how generous the rewards would be. Night Leaning Moon continued. The martial arena's reward is a chance to forge a custom-made artifact. The sacred source life form used to forge the artifact will not be lower than 4-star, but it will not be higher than 6-star either. This opportunity was provided by Bamboo Monarch. As for the civil and martial arena's reward, it will be a sacred source life form and a radiant metal. Lu Jie sucked in a breath of cold air and could not help but exclaim. It's a radiant metal? The martial arena's artifact and the cultural relic arena's sacred source life form both surprised Lu Jie. However, compared to the radiant metal, even the sacred source life form was nothing. The third round. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:14. In Lu Jie's opinion, the radiant light metal was more valuable than a sacred source life form, but not because it could increase one's strength like a sacred source life form. The radiant light metal was just a metal made of metal and spirit materials. It had no use on its own. But the radiant metal had an extraordinary symbolic meaning. This was because the radiant light metal was something related to the Radiance Envoy. Apart from being selected from the Radiance 100 sequence, the Radiance Envoy's other selection methods were to be selected from people with Radiance medals. Ever since the previous generation's 5 Radiance Envoys were gathered, the next generation's Radiance medal, which had the qualifications to participate in the Radiance Envoy selection, had already started to look for suitable people. The Radiant Light medal came from the Imperial Court. Every generation of Radiance Envoys would have 10 Radiant Light medals issued before the selection. In the past 5 years, 9 of the 10 Radiant Light medals that represented the selection of the next Radiance Envoys had been issued. The Radiant Light medal, which was the reward for the champion of both the civil and military arenas in the Great Night Meeting, was the last of the 10 Radiant Light emblems for this generation's Radiance Envoy selection. However, the champion of the Evernight Assembly's civil and martial arena was equivalent to directly having the qualifications to select the next Radiance Envoy. However, this was not the only benefit of the Radiant Light medal. Even if a person with the Radiant Light medal did not become a Radiance Envoy in the end, he would still be a Radiance Envoy. They could also choose to join the Radiance Knights, which had a total of 10 members and was created to protect the 5 current Radiance Envoys. As soon as Lu Jie knew that the Nyx Assembly had a civil and martial arena, he had subconsciously thought of Lin Yuan. As far as he knew, Lin Yuan was the most outstanding creation master and combat class spirit chi professional. But on second thought, Lu Jie felt that the Nyx Assembly was being held a little too early. If the Nyx Assembly could be held a year later, the Radiant Light Metal and Sacred Source Life Form might really be in Lin Yuan's pocket. This year, Lin Yuan had confirmed that he would participate in the Radiance 100 Sequences selection. Given his strength, it would be easy for him to become a Radiance 100 Sequence member. Before the Radiance Envoy selection, the top 10 of the Radiance 100 Sequence would have the opportunity to select the current Radiance Envoy. At that time, no one in the Radiance 100 sequence would hide their strength, and there would definitely be an intense battle among the sequences. At that time, the entire Radiance 100 sequence rankings would be completely disrupted and reorganized. The selection of the past Radiance envoys had all used the points-based assessment method without exception. In the end, the top 5 members with the highest points would be selected to become the current Radiance envoys. If he didn't use the Radiant Light Medal and instead obtain the opportunity to enter the Radiance Envoys test by competing for the top 10 spots in the Radiance 100 sequence, he wouldn't be able to enter the Radiance Envoy test. Then, the Radiant Light Medal would be converted into 100 points before the Radiance Envoy selection began, allowing the owner of the Radiant Light Medal to be one step ahead from the beginning. It would be a pity if he missed such an opportunity. Night Leaning Moon saw that Lu Jie had finished his seclusion and no longer needed her protection, so she prepared to leave the land of spirit suppression and head to her palace in the capital, Night Ending Palace. As the organizer of the Nyx Assembly, Night Leaning Moon could be said to be late. Although there were still a few days before the Nyx Assembly began, today was the day they had agreed to discuss important matters. At this time the old man, Supreme Chef who always appeared last, should have arrived at Yeong Palace. Just as Night Leaning Moon was about to turn around and leave, Lu Jie called out to her. Night Leaning Moon turned to look at Lu Jie and heard him say, "Teacher, I want to wear the Spirit Guard standard mask for this Nyx Assembly." Upon hearing that, Night Leaning Moon's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. The Nyx Assembly was originally to publicize Lu Jie's identity and let others clearly know who her disciple was. If Lu Jie wore a mask at this time, then half of the meaning of the Nyx Assembly that she had specially organized would be lost. However, Night Leaning Moon could hear that Lu Jie's words were not a question or a request. When Lu Jie said this, he had probably already made up his mind. Night Leaning Moon asked Lu Jie with some confusion. What? The Spirit Guard's standard mask was a special mask made by the Spirit Guard's members when they went on a mission so that the enemy could not see their appearance clearly. Almost every part of his face that could be seen was firmly covered by it. Furthermore, the Sound Shark skin was added to the Spirit Guard's standard mask, which had a certain voice-changing effect. If Lu Jie wore the Spirit Guard's standard mask, even people who were very familiar with his voice would not be able to recognize him. Therefore, Night Leaning Moon was very curious about the reason why Lu Jie wanted to wear a mask. Lu Jie gently placed his hand on the Class 2 Creation Master's retainer crest on his chest. Upon seeing Lu Jie's action, Night Leaning Moon immediately knew what he was thinking. Night Leaning Moon heard Lu Jie speak. "Master, I'm Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Lin Yuan will also participate in the Nyx Assembly. I don't want to stand by Lin Yuan's side before his identity is exposed. More people will pay attention to me and not Lin Yuan." Lu Jie's words were very simple, but when Night Leaning Moon heard them, she suddenly felt as if she had traveled through time and space. Back then she seemed to be like this to the Moon Empress, right? She only wanted to silently stand by the Moon Empress' side and protect her. However, at that time, the Moon Empress did not choose her but chose Mystic Moon. It seemed that her disciple was much luckier than her. Night Leaning Moon sighed. After understanding Lu Jie's thoughts, she only softly said one word. "Okay." Then she turned and walked out of the door. It was as if she had turned into a ball of eternal night at noon and disappeared from the land of spirit suppression. After Lin Yuan returned to the mansion, it could be said that there was nothing special to be busy with. Recently there had been no news from the Sun family, the Dew Immortal Garden, and the Blissful Sea clan, which were cooperating with Lin Yuan. Although the transactions were still going on, even Sun Ningxiang did not contact Lin Yuan as frequently as before. As a top faction, the Dew Immortal Garden definitely had to participate in a grand event like the Nyx Assembly. There were only 3 core members left in the Sun family. According to Sun Ningxiang's need for the Bronze/Legend Muscle Revitalizing Camellia, given Sun Ningxiang's grandmother's injuries, she probably would not be able to make it to the royal capital to participate in the Nyx Assembly. Sun Ningxiang's younger brother was still young and was at the age where he did not know anything. Therefore, Sun Ningxiang should be participating in the Nyx Assembly alone. Given the Dew Immortal Garden's current situation of being surrounded by wolves, it should be very difficult for Sun Ningxiang to participate in this Nyx Assembly. It just so happened that Lin Yuan had a business deal at the Nyx Assembly that he wanted to discuss with Sun Ningxiang as the Moon Empress disciple. First, end of chapter. Chapter 8:15. In the past few days, Lin Yuan did not contact the Long family to ask about the royal armored martial god insects. He did not even examine the heavenly fragrance beauty butterfly and the 12 water blobs nurtured by the dead sacred source lifeform's origin movement water. Lin Yuan pushed these matters to the back of the Nix assembly. However, the Celestial Council that happened once every 7 days went on as scheduled. This time, the Celestial Council was much more relaxed than before. The Celestial Council was held once every 7 days, and the intervals were very short. For Lin, who had a powerful background, she could do a lot of things in 7 days. However, 7 days passed by in a flash for Su. Even after 7 days of fighting, Su had not fully adapted to the abilities of the Shadow Edge Bat. This time, the Celestial Council meeting was different from the previous meetings that had been presiding over. This time the two of them mainly chose to listen. They listened to Lin and Su's joy of regaining new life and their experiences in the past 7 days. Before Lin and Su signed a contract with the Northern and Southern constellations, they were not considered members of the Celestial Council. Therefore, as the contractor of the Leo throne, Lin Yuan could examine Lin and Su's wills. However, they had now become official members of the Celestial Council. Lin and Su were contractors of the Andromeda and Perseus constellations. Due to the principle of respect, Lin Yuan could not casually examine their wills. Therefore, they listened to Lin and Su's story in the past 7 days with great interest. Lin's experience in the past 7 days could be said to be very dreamy. She was like a princess in a fairy tale who was under a sleeping spell. When she woke up, she became the most dazzling existence and began to live the life of a real princess from a sleeping princess. At the same time, Lin told Lin Yuan that she had awakened the beast patterns. Lin was very sure that the spirit speech white lion and azure cloud leopard beast patterns on her body must be related to Lin Yuan. Lin did not know what method Lin Yuan had used to let her regain light, but she thought that regaining the power of light could also help her awaken the hidden beast patterns in her body. Lin Yuan was rather surprised by the beast patterns that Lin had mentioned. He did not expect Lin to have 2 Fey bloodlines in her body. Once Feys reached Myth 2, they would be able to take human form. Such Feys could also have offspring with human spirit chi professionals and live happily together. However, if Lin's ancestor could awaken beast patterns in her descendants, then it was undoubtedly a creation breed Fey. However, Fey's bloodlines had always been tyrannical, and different Fey's bloodlines would clash with each other. During Chime's evolution process, the original bloodline in its body had to fight to the death with the Luan and Phoenix bloodline before it was willing to give up. Therefore, it was rare for Lin to awaken 2 beast marks. Awakening 2 types of beast patterns was equivalent to awakening 2 corresponding bloodlines of the creation breed phase. Due to the frail bodies of spirit chi professionals, they were unable to augment themselves with the power of the 2 beast patterns. However, if one were to contract 2 Feys with the same bloodline as the beast pattern, they would be able to use the beast pattern to enhance the Fey's growth. It could be said that once Lin awakened her talent, her future path would be very smooth. As the system, it was as if Lin Yuan had found a top-notch protagonist. In the future he would not need to worry about Lin. However, on Su's side, the more Lin Yuan listened to Su's experience, the more he felt that something was wrong. In the end, Lin Yuan finally knew what the problem was. Su was now running around in the dangerous underground world with the Diamond Fey storage box and the 2 bottles of spirit fluid that were used to enhance the Edge Shadow Dark Bat's strength, but he did not use them. This behavior was so stupid that it was somewhat cute. However, Lin Yuan could not explain such common sense to Su through words. This common sense was often accumulated bit by bit in life. If Lin Yuan explained it to Su, it would be equivalent to giving a lesson to Su, who was like a baby in this aspect. A lot of things had to start from the beginning. Otherwise, he would have to use one thing to explain things that Su did not understand. It was very likely that Su would get 2 things that he did not understand. If she really gave Su a lesson, she could only support the Heavenly Council for half an hour at a time with her spiritual energy. By the time Su understood all this common sense, half a year would have passed. In the end, Lin Yuan really had no choice but to use the law of consumption to pass a few books on phase grades and quality, willpower runes, the usage of the Diamond Phase storage box, the relationship between spirit chi professionals, phase and creation masters, and other basic knowledge to Su. The transmission of these books consumed a lot of Lin Yuan's power of the law. This situation really fulfilled the old saying that the most expensive thing in this world was knowledge. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, it was very necessary to pass this knowledge to Su. A person who wanted to struggle forward was not most afraid of setbacks and hardships, but ignorance and ignorance. What Lin Yuan wanted to do was to break the barrier of Su's ignorance and let Su have a certain understanding of these common sense. A few more days passed unknowingly, and the Nyx assembly was at hand. During this period, Princess had done her best to absorb the source energy in the Law Source crystals and produced a large number of Law crystals. In the past few days, whenever the Law crystals produced a leather bag, Lin Yuan would immediately send it to Endless Summer, in order to let Endless Summer successfully reach the pinnacle of Myth 3. However, after Endless Summer reached the pinnacle of Myth 3 and absorbed a large number of Law crystals containing pure power of the Law, there was still no movement to promote to a creation breed. There was a barrier that countless Fays were stuck in between Myth 3 and becoming a creation breed, and this barrier was very difficult to break. Lin Yuan's devotion to Endless Summer's Law crystals had far exceeded his and Endless Summer's expectations at that time. However, Lin Yuan had such a large number of Law crystals in his hands, which was enough to pay for Endless Summer's consumption. Next, Lin Yuan only needed to keep providing Law crystals to Endless Summer and help it break through the Myth breed barrier. In addition to purifying the Law crystals, the world inside Princess Luo Kun had also become illusory after accumulating a large number of Law crystal source energy. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and thought silently in his heart. Endless Summer didn't become a creation breed Fae before the Nyx assembly as I expected. I wonder if the Dark Death Law engraved in Princess Luo Kun can successfully transform into the Dark Death world before the Nyx assembly as I expected? Lin Yuan immediately ordered Princess Luo Kun. Princess Luo Kun, inject the source energy you absorbed from the Law crystals into the Dark Death Law, which is currently at the mid-stage of Myth 3. The button was sick. It really couldn't move yesterday, so it couldn't be written. I'll make up for it in the next 2 days. I'll do my best to update it. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:16. Lin Yuan's expression was grave when he gave the order to Princess Dress. He was no longer as confident as he had been a few days ago. Through Endless Summer's consumption of Law crystals, Lin Yuan knew that he had overestimated the difficulty of transforming a Myth breed Fae into a creation breed Fae. However, it turned out that he had underestimated it. Endless Summer had just reached Myth 3, and its foundation was much lower than veteran Myth 3 Faes. However, Endless Summer's talent had already made up for the lack of foundation. In terms of talent, as long as Endless Summer accumulated enough, it was destined to be qualified to experience the calamity of creation. It would also fight for a chance to transform into a creation breed from the calamity of creation. However, the talented Endless Summer had already accepted over 3,000 Law crystals from Lin Yuan in the past few days. Including the Law crystals that Endless Summer had consumed previously, it had now absorbed a total of 4,000 Law crystals. Even with such a huge supply of Law crystals, Endless Summer was still an unbreakable barrier to becoming a creation breed Fae. Endless Summer's example was right here. It was destined to be much harder than Lin Yuan expected for the Dark Death Law engraved in Princess Dress to transform into the Dark Death world. This made Lin Yuan's heart a little heavy. Everyone could only participate in one of the Great Knight General Assembly's civil, martial, and martial duels. Without the Dark Death world, even if Lin Yuan used the muscle transcending grass to become a martial arts master, he would be able to maximize the power of the Spirit Essence explosion and deal damage equivalent to a Diamond X/Fantasy V phase all-out attack. Even so, he still did not dare to say that he could win in the cultural duels. If the Dark Death Law could not successfully transform into the Dark Death world before the Great Knight General Assembly, Lin Yuan had already planned to give up the civil and martial duels and participate in the civil duels instead. However, Lin Yuan was also gambling if he wanted to win the championship in the civil duels. If the civil duels happened to compete in increasing the phase grade, then Lin Yuan would be helpless. The Great Knight General Assembly civil duels would definitely create an undisturbed environment for creation masters to concoct spirit fluids. Creation masters could also use their contracted phase to assist them in the concoction process. Lin Yuan could still bring Genius along. Although Genius could use its mental strength to concoct Grade 3 spirit liquid, it hadn't grasped the method of using its soul to concoct Grade 4 spirit liquid. The Radiance Federation stipulated that the age range of the younger generation was below 30 years old. It also meant that creation masters from top factions who were below 30 years old could participate in the Great Knight Assembly's literature contest. It might be a little hard to become a Class 4 creation master at the age of 30, but it wasn't impossible to become a pinnacle Class 3 creation master. The Long Tao that Lin Yuan knew was only 26 years old this year, but he was already an advanced Class 3 creation master. With Long Tao's talent as a creation master, he would be able to become a pinnacle Class 3 creation master before the age of 30. The other Apex factions youths might not have better creation master talent than Long Tao, but there would always be youths with similar talents. When competing with such prodigies, geniuses' ability, which was equivalent to a Class 3 advanced creation master, wasn't enough. Furthermore, the Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme also had disciples of the appropriate age. The Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme's disciples would definitely be superior to Long Tao in terms of creation master strength. With that thought, Lin Yuan felt that the pressure on him had increased. After Princess received Lin Yuan's order, she stopped absorbing the Law Origin crystals in her hand. Princess could not help but become a little eager to try when she sensed the source power absorbed from over 4,000 Law Origin crystals in Luo Kun. The main way for Princess to improve was to absorb the power of Law in the Law Origin crystals and use the source power in the Law Origin crystals to strengthen the laws engraved in Luo Kun. Princess had absorbed so much of the source power in the Law Origin crystals, but she listened to Lin Yuan and didn't use it. This caused her star class to not be improved. Next, the process of improving Dark Death's Law would consume a lot of source power. This process was also equivalent to improving Princess strength and star class. At that moment, the source power in Princess Luo Kun spread to Princess's entire body, causing her snow-like skin to ripple with a sparkling stream of light. At the highest point in the sky of Luo Kun's world, the dark plague crow formed by Dark Death's Law was competing with the Dead Dream's Law's dream-eating bat. As they chased and collided, the two different dark-type laws outlined the black sky in Princess Luo Kun's world that was filled with the smell of withering and perplexity. At that moment, the source power in Princess Luo Kun's world that made the world seem illusory took the initiative to entangle the dark plague crow formed by Dark Death's Law in the sky. The source power kept pouring into the dark plague crow's body, causing its aura to constantly expand. This caused the status of the dark plague crow and the dream-eating bat to change. Instead of the two being evenly matched, the dark plague crow chased and the dream-eating bat fled. The dark plague crow formed by Dark Death's Law kept becoming stronger with the injection of source power, causing the dream-eating bat, which was repeatedly hit by the dark plague crow, to not dare to resist anymore. The dream-eating bat formed by Dead Dream's Law had no choice but to sink from the highest point in the sky to the sea level below the dark plague crow. As time passed, the source power absorbed by Princess Luo Kun was also constantly being consumed. With every passing minute, close to 50 Law Origin crystal source power would be injected into the dark plague crow formed by Dark Death's Law. An hour had passed, and the source power in over 3,000 Law Origin crystals had finally allowed the dark plague crow's aura to reach a critical point. At that moment, the dark plague crow was like a tough balloon, and the injection of source power was like air. The dark plague crow formed by Dark Death's Law could no longer take in any more air. Lin Yuan knew that as long as he pumped source power into the dark plague crow's body again, it might be possible for Dark Death's Law to break through that extremely difficult threshold. After breaking through this barrier, the Dark Death rule formed by the Dark Night Scourge Raven could evolve into the Dark Death world. After sensing the situation of Dark Death's Law, Lin Yuan continued to give orders to Princess Luo Kun. Princess, directly inject the source power absorbed from 500 Law Origin crystals into the Dark Death world. Princess Luo Kun was slightly hesitant when she heard Lin Yuan's instructions. She then said, "Master, I think Dark Death's Law has now reached a critical point. It's possible that the source energy absorbed from 1 to 200 Law Origin crystals will be injected into the Dark Death Law, and the Dark Death Law will be able to transform into the Dark Death world." Upon hearing Princess Luo Kun's words, Lin Yuan said decisively in a deep voice, "I'll use the source power in 500 Law Origin crystals." The second was even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:17. At this point, Lin Yuan paused for a moment and immediately changed his words. Don't use the source power in the 500 Law Origin crystals. Use the source power in the 700 Law Origin crystals to break through. While speaking, Lin Yuan could not help but recall his conversation with Endless Summer. According to Endless Summer, if the laws wanted to transform into a world, they did not need to absorb more power. Endless Summer now needed a large number of law crystals not because the Enlightenment Law needed to be strengthened again, but because Endless Summer needed a large amount of pure law power as an energy source for the Enlightenment Law. It wanted the Enlightenment Law to break free from the framework that bound it and open up a pattern that could create a world. Since it was to break out of a pattern, the more power, the better and safer it was. This was the conclusion Lin Yuan had come to after flushing the toilet. If the toilet was blocked, it would not be able to flush the toilet even if hundreds of cups of water were poured. However, if 50 cups of water were gathered into a bucket, the bucket of water would be flushed down quickly. It was very likely that the toilet that could not be flushed with hundreds of cups of water would be flushed by the bucket of water gathered from 50 cups of water. After Princess received Lin Yuan's instructions again and understood Lin Yuan's intentions, she no longer hesitated. The source-type power within the 700 Law Origin crystals converged and surged into the body of the Dark Death nomological form of the Dark Night Scourge under the control of the princess. With such a large amount of source power, the Dark Death Law's Dark Plague Raven kept changing. In the end, its entire body swelled up. Then, the Dark Death Raven, which had expanded to the limit, was blown into pieces, and the fragments instantly dispersed all over the horizon of the Luo Kun world. With these fragments as the origin, a deep shadow rose up, and the shadow immediately intertwined into boundless darkness. The darkness overlapped and turned into a world with hidden killing intent. As soon as this world was formed, it was like ink that had invaded the clear lake water and kept spreading as if it wanted to devour the world and Princess Luo Kun together. At that moment, Princess Luo Kun's eyes narrowed, and her dress danced. The other laws and willpower in Princess Luo Kun pounced on the Dark Death Law that had just transformed into the Dark Death world under her command. However, in front of this Dark Death world, any willpower and laws seemed to be one realm apart. Not only could they not stop the expansion of the Dark Death world, but they were also easily swallowed by the Dark Death world. Just as the Dark Death world was about to refine these rules and willpower, the princess lifted her hand and took off the crown on her head. Then he casually threw the crown into the world inside the princess' skirt. At this moment, within Princess Luo Kun's world, a huge crown that almost covered the entire sky of Luo Kun's world appeared. The crown contained infinite power as it spun, pulling the Dark Death world in front of it in an instant. In the end, under the absorption of the crown, the Dark Death world that had just transformed from the Dark Death rules turned into a pure black gemstone. This black gem was directly embedded in a groove on the crown. The black gem was transparent and pure. At a glance, a world filled with killing intent was constantly evolving within the pure black gem. During the evolution, a small black crow appeared in the center of the Dark Death world. The pitch-black crows circled and danced in the black gem, as if they were the core of the entire world of darkness. Upon seeing this scene, Lin Yuan knew that the Dark Death Law, which was originally at the mid-stage of Myth 3, had finally completely transformed into the Dark Death world. The price for this was the source power that the princess had absorbed from 3,700 law source crystals. After the Dark Death Law and the princess skirt had transformed into the Dark Death world, the princess star class had also changed, growing from the original 1-star to 2-star. Upon seeing the princess transform into 2-star, Lin Yuan was not only not happy, but also a little melancholic. Lin Yuan had recorded the law source crystals and law crystal fragments that the princess had absorbed since her transformation into 1-star. Although the princess star class seemed to be improving very quickly, it had risen by 1-star in a month. However, the law crystal fragments consumed by this 1-star were nearly half a kilogram, and nearly 5,000 law source crystals had been consumed. It was also thanks to the zither that Lin Yuan could continuously produce the golden lotus brocade pearls. Otherwise, relying on the heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls and the phase that Lin Yuan had enhanced, he did not know how long it would take for the princess to raise her star class. Lin Yuan had been full of confidence that he now had more than 16,000 law source crystals and should be able to transform the princess from the infancy to the growth stage. Raising her star class to 4-star would obtain the second function. However, it now seemed that relying on the remaining 10,000 law source crystals would be a little difficult to elevate the princess to 3-star. Fortunately, the Dark Death Law had transformed into the Dark Death world, which was considered to have met Lin Yuan's expectations. At that moment, the princess was holding the crown and happily looking at the black gem embedded in the crown that had been transformed from the Dark Death world. The princess looked at the gem very much like Endless Summer who had bought new jewelry. Lin Yuan stared at the princess and watched as she stared at the crown for 10 minutes without any intention of putting it on her head. Lin Yuan could not help but sigh. He did not know how other people's sacred source life forms were nurtured, but he had consumed so many law source crystals and law crystal fragments. The process of nurturing the princess was like playing a costume-changing game. However, if this was really a costume-changing game, the amount of money spent was simply too great. Lin Yuan did not interrupt the princess's appreciation of the Dark Death world. Instead, he felt the Dark Death world through his soul. As soon as he sensed it, a look of joy and excitement immediately appeared on his face. Just by feeling the strength of the Dark Death world, Lin Yuan knew why it was difficult for Myth Breed phase to break through to Creation Breed phase. Or rather, why creation breed Fays were so much stronger than myth breed Fays. This was because after a Fae became a creation breed, it would control the power of a world with a type of attribute. It was not something that the power of laws could contend with or compare with. Lin Yuan tried to mobilize the Dark Death Law's power, and in an instant, a shocking aura and pressure emerged from his body. It was like the ruler of a dark world. Previously, Lin Yuan had discovered that the law engraved in the princess's dress could not display the unique power of laws in Fae's bodies. It was like endless summer's enlightenment law, which could enlighten a plant every 5 years. The mother of bloodbath's blood law could easily extract blood essence from Fae's bodies without the creation master's means. These were the unique abilities that the laws gave Faes. Now, the Dark Death world had also given Lin Yuan an ability, the ability to wither. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:18. The wither ability was mainly targeted at plant Faes. When the power of Dark Death was attached to plant Faes, it could cause them to wither and decay quickly. Although Lin Yuan did not pay extra attention to the wither ability derived from the Dark Death Law's metamorphosis into the Dark Death world, it was better than nothing. Through sensing the Dark Death world, Lin Yuan found that he could still use the Queen's Holy Sword mode to strike out the Dark Death Law like before. At the same time, under True Data, the Queen's Holy Sword embracing Sacred Sword state had a new skill-like function. This skill-like thing was formed after the Dark Death Law had metamorphosed into the Dark Death world. Sword skill, Dark Death world, Dark Crow Withering Strike. Inject all the power in the Dark Death world into the Holy Sword, and the Holy Sword's blade will split into 28 night crows with the power of Dark Death. The contractor will swing the Holy Sword to strike the 28 night crows 28 times. If the 28 strikes form a combo, each combo will trigger an additional layer of wither. Every 14 layers of wither will cause a wither strike to the target. The 56 wither strikes formed by 28 perfect combo will cause the target to enter a true wither state. Lin Yuan asked the Queen after seeing the introduction of the new sword skill, Dark Crow Withering Strike. What's the new sword skill under the Holy Sword mode's Holy Sword tip? Upon hearing that, the Queen explained. Master, in the future, every time I master a world Holy Sword state, a sword skill will appear. Sword skills are completely different from using the power of the law. Although there is no difference in the way of using it, the sword skill that represents the power of the world also needs to be filled with the power of the law world again before it can be used. However, sword skills can trigger the effect of the law world, which is far more powerful than directly striking out the power of the law world. It's just that sword skills are extremely difficult. They require very strong combat skills and movement techniques to be able to combine sword skills in battle. Upon hearing the Queen's words, Lin Yuan's face revealed an eager expression. Speaking of combat skills and movement techniques, even if Lin Yuan understood that there was always someone better, he still did not believe that anyone in this world could compare to him. Even if he could not combine sword skills, it would be even more impossible for others to do so. If he couldn't even combine his sword skills, then it would be even more impossible for others to combine their sword skills. It seemed that the sword skill derived from the princess' sacred sword state was completely tailor-made for him. Lin Yuan asked the princess, "If I use the Dark Crow Withering Strike once, how long would it take for the energy in the Dark Death world to be completely replenished?" The princess counted on her little finger for a long time before answering Lin Yuan's question. "Master, if you don't replenish it with the source energy in the Law Origin Crystal, you'll need a natural month to replenish the Dark Death world's energy. If I use the source type energy in the Law Origin Crystal for support, I'll need 4 natural weeks to completely replenish it." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan could not help but reveal a "are you kidding me" expression. What was the difference between 1 natural month and 4 natural weeks? The 4 natural weeks added up to a total of 28 days, and a natural month was only 30 days. Even with the help of source energy, it had only increased for 2 days. 2 days was too short compared to the base of 30 days. However, Lin Yuan still asked the princess, "How much source energy does it take to support it?" The princess asked with some heartache. "Master, if you want to advance it by 2 days, you'll need to consume about 600 source energy absorbed from the Law Origin Crystal." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately decided not to use source energy to restore the sword skill's cooldown time even if he was beaten to death. It was not that Lin Yuan did not have other complete laws now, and these complete laws could all transform into nomological worlds. With that extra nomological power, Lin Yuan might as well nurture a few more nomological worlds. That way it would be equivalent to using another method to shorten the sword skill's cooldown time. Since the sword skill could only be used once for such a long time, Lin Yuan, who was eager to try, dispelled the idea of immediately using the Dark Crow Withering Strike to test its power. He intended to use the sword skill when he really needed it. When he checked the Princess True data, Lin Yuan keenly noticed that the words main dark/auxiliary miscellaneous had appeared in the Princess Sacred Source type that was not originally displayed. Sacred Source name, Sacred Sword Wielding Princess, Sacred Source Species, Source Family/Sacred Source Species, Sacred Source Star Class, 2 stars, Sacred Source Type, Main Dark/Auxiliary Miscellaneous Functions Frowny Face Princess Form, Princess Skirt, can extract the willpower rune of a dead Fae or Source Type item. The willpower of the dead Fantasy Breed Phase willpower rune or the laws in the Myth Breed Phase Law Crystal are engraved on the Princess Skirt. At the same time, the Law Crystal that has been extracted will become a Law Crystal containing pure power of Law. Sacred Sword Form, Sacred Sword's Blade. The blade pierces the skirt and consumes the body's spirit chi to strike out the same type of law and willpower accumulated in the skirt. Sword Skill Dark Death World Dark Crow Withering Strike. Inject all the power in the Dark Death World into the Sacred Sword. The Sacred Sword's blade will split into 28 night crows with the power of Dark Death. The contractor will swing the Sacred Sword to strike out 28 night crows for 28 attacks. If the 28 attacks form a combo, each combo will trigger an additional layer of Withering Effect. Every 14 layers of Withering Effect will cause a Withering Strike to the target. The 56 withering effects formed by 28 perfect combo will cause the target to enter a true withering state. The Princess Sacred Source type had other effects since the Dark Death Law had transformed into the Dark Death World. It seemed that the Princess Sacred Source type depended on the attributes of the Law World. From the Auxiliary Miscellaneous type, it could be seen that the Princess would have more Law Worlds in the future, and it was very likely that there would be more Sacred Source types. Or perhaps the current Dark type would be replaced by other stronger types. Lin Yuan looked at the time and found that it was already past 6 in the morning. There were still 12 hours before Lin Yuan and Lu Jie set off for the Nyx assembly. Lin Yuan did not intend to be idle during these 12 hours. He intended to use this time to improve his strength. He first let the princess absorb the Myth 3 Poison Law Crystal that he had traded with the Long family. Since the Dark Death Law had transformed into the Dark Death World inside the princess skirt, it had turned into a gem and embedded on the crown. This caused the insufferably arrogant Dark Plague Crows in the world inside the skirt. First more. Seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. Today I'll start the Nyx assembly and pave the way. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:19. Thus, according to the order of seats, it was the Dead Dream's turn to become the leader of the group. However, before the Dream-Eating Bat could enjoy the glory of the leader in the Queen's Luo Kun world, a huge python with jade-green scales all over its body appeared in the sky. This huge jade-green python was the jade-scaled sky-devouring python that had nurtured the Myth 3 Vicious Poison Law Crystal during its lifetime. As the Queen continuously absorbed the Vicious Poison Law in the Law Crystal, the jade-scaled sky-devouring python's somewhat blurry body became more and more solid. When the Queen completely extracted the Vicious Poison Law in the Law Crystal, the jade-scaled sky-devouring python that appeared in the Luo Kun world sky roared and crashed into the Dream-Eating Bat that was flying wantonly in the sky. After a few collisions with the Dream-Eating Bat, the Dead Dream's Law Incarnation and the jade-scaled sky-devouring python's Vicious Poison Law Incarnation were both at the mid-stage of Myth 3. Therefore it was difficult for the two to suppress each other. After fighting for a while, there was really no result, and the jade-scaled sky-devouring python came to the ground. It dominated the land and sea, competing with the Dream-Eating Bat in the sky. This caused the various phases formed by willpower and laws on the ground and sea to tremble in fear. Lin Yuan could not help but feel very interested as he watched the changes in the Luo Kun world after the Queen absorbed the Vicious Poison Law. Every infusion of laws that currently played a dominant role in Luo Kun's world would cause earth-shattering changes in Luo Kun's world. After the Queen absorbed the Vicious Poison Law, Lin Yuan's poison resistance had been greatly improved. With the Myth 3 Vicious Poison Law in his body, even if he took a cup of water to drink the poison of an ordinary platinum poison-type Fae, it should not cause any damage to his body. As for the poison of a platinum/fantasy breed poison-type Fae, Lin Yuan dared not guarantee it. After all, some platinum/fantasy breed poison-type Faes had mental or soul toxins. In the face of mental and soul toxins, the Vicious Poison Law could not provide Lin Yuan with the corresponding resistance. However, the poison resistance that the Vicious Poison Law gave him could allow him to fight with some high-grade poison-type Faes without being afraid of the slightest thing. Even if he was attacked by a high-grade poison Fae, it would not cause a fatal injury in a short time. After the princess absorbed the Myth 3 Law crystal, Lin Yuan ordered her to inject all the remaining source-type power in her body into the Cold Flame Law, which was only at early Myth 2. The Cold Flame Law, which had both ice and fire attributes, could give him resistance to both ice and fire at the same time. It could be said that among the 3 complete rules in Princess Luo Kun, even though the grade of the Frost Flames rule was relatively low, the priority of the Myth 2 Frost Flames rule was definitely above the Dead Dream rule and the Ferocious Poison rule, which were at the middle stage of Myth 3. At that moment, there was still some source power left in Princess Robe after transforming the Dark Death rules into the Dark Death world. This source power came from about 800 source crystals. Raising the rank of a law was much easier than transforming it into a world. He estimated that he would need about 400 Law's origin crystal source-type energy to raise the Frost Flame Law at the early stage of Myth 2 to Myth 3. The princess's 800 Law origin crystals injected her with the endogenous power, and the Frost Flame Law quickly advanced toward Myth 3. The additional source power allowed the Frost Flame Law to break through to Myth 3 and reach the pinnacle of Myth 3's middle stage before stopping. During the process of the Frost Flame Law being injected with source power, the snow-capped cold snow pine in Princess Luo Kun's world grew rapidly. The pine branches extended like a dragon's spine as though they were going to pierce through the sky. The lush pine branches occupied 1/3 of the dream-eating bat's territory in the sky. As the aura of the ice flames spread, it was as though a song of ice and fire was being played in Princess Luo Kun's world. The jade-scaled sky-devouring python, which originally wanted to perch on the cold snow pine's branches, did not dare to move forward. The dream-eating bat and the jade-scaled sky-devouring python had originally been evenly matched in Princess Luo Kun's world. Now it was a 3-way situation where the dream-eating bat, the jade-scaled sky-devouring python, and the cold snow pine were fighting each other. The broken laws and willpower that took the form of phase joined the 3 camps, immediately making the world inside Princess Luo Kun more lively. Lin Yuan was just about to test his resistance to the ice and fire elements and let Chu Xi use the burning sunflower to burn him. However, when he looked at the time, he realized that 12 hours had passed unknowingly. There were only 20 minutes left before the agreed time with Wuxia. Lin Yuan hurriedly left the spirit lock spatial zone. He changed into an elegant yet relatively low-key blue and white spirit chi clothing and walked out of his room. When he went downstairs, he saw Wen Yu, the mother of Bloodbath, and Chu Xi sitting on the water rhinoceros leather sofa downstairs. On the table in front of the water rhinoceros leather sofa, there were 2 brocade boxes. One box was made of moon-colored brocade embroidered with apricot patterns and moonlight totems, while the other box was made of ink-colored brocade embroidered with hundreds of types of ferocious mutated beasts. These mutated beasts seemed to sink into the darkness, but they also seemed to be on standby in the darkness, ready to break free at any time. When Lin Yuan saw that Wuxia was not downstairs, he could not help but feel a little puzzled. He had gone downstairs 20 minutes earlier, but it was already a little late. Could Wuxia, who had always been steady and punctual, have forgotten the time? Wuxia was the main character of the Nyx assembly. Just as Lin Yuan was thinking, he faintly heard the sound of the door closing. Then he found Wuxia appearing on the stairs behind him. Wuxia looked at Lin Yuan and scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I tried out the Insect Queen's new combat style in the training room. I thought I had only trained for a short while, but I didn't expect it to be so late. Upon hearing Wuxia's words, he knew that Wuxia had encountered the same situation as him. However, even if time was a little tight, they could still rush to Yeong Palace. When you saw Lin Yuan and Wuxia coming downstairs together, she hurriedly walked over and said, "Brother Lin, you're here. Young Master, Brother Lu Master and the Right Keeper of the Spirit Guards have just delivered 2 sets of clothes. They said that the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi specially ordered them to deliver it. They wanted you to change into it before the official night control assembly starts." After saying that, she handed the box woven with moonlight brocade to Lin Yuan and the box woven with ink-colored brocade to Wuxia. At that moment, Chu Xi also came over and looked curiously at the boxes in their hands. "Lin Yuan, Big Brother Lu, what kind of clothes are in your boxes?" The second one was even worse. End of chapter. Chapter 820. Lin Yuan could not help but think to himself. Chu Xi addressed Wuxia as Big Brother Lu, but when she addressed Wuxia as her biological brother, she directly addressed him by his full name. However, Lin Yuan was already used to this situation. After so many years, he and Chu Xi already had the most comfortable way to get along with each other. Lin Yuan and Lu Jie opened the brocade box in their hands and were almost blinded by the clothes in the box. Under true data, there were no less than 900 kinds of rare spiritual ingredients on the clothes in the box. The return from faraway Manor's hidden dragon lake, the underground space, and the various decorations within the main residence could already be said to be exceptionally luxurious. But now, even if he sold the entire returning from faraway Manor, he would definitely not be able to exchange for a sleeve of the clothes in the brocade box. The mother of Bloodbath looked at the clothes in the brocade box and exclaimed in surprise. It's actually Yu Hua's and Yi Che's. For a grand event like the Nix Assembly, shouldn't the Moon Empress and Yi Che be wearing the Moon Empress and the Chief Guard Ye's robes? The mother of Bloodbath had always known that Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple. It was only when the Spirit Guard's right guard visited that the mother of Bloodbath realized that Lu Jie was the Chief Guard's disciple. On one hand, the mother of Bloodbath was surprised by Lu Jie's identity. On the other hand, it felt that Lu Jie was as low-key as Lin Yuan. The mother of Bloodbath stepped forward and carefully examined the two pieces of clothing in Lin Yuan's and Lu Jie's hands. After a long time, it confirmed that they weren't wearing the Moonlight Imperial Robe and Night Imperial Robe. Instead, it was made according to the same materials used by the Moonlight Regalia and Yi Che, and according to Lin Yuan and Lu Jie's figures. These two pieces of clothing did not have the Moon Crown pattern or the Night Crown pattern, which represented the status and authority of the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi. Apart from that, it could be said that they were almost exactly the same. It was no wonder that he had mistaken them. In fact, even Wen Yu, who had been a spirit attendant in the Radiant Moon Palace, had mistaken the attire in the brocade box for the Moonlight Royal Robe when Lin Yuan had opened it. Upon hearing the mother of Bloodbath's words, Lin Yuan and Lu Jie looked at each other. The clothes in the brocade box were too luxurious, and the accessories were too complicated. It was very inconvenient to wear them in the arena. Fortunately, the Nix assembly would be held in the civil arena. The martial arena and the civil and martial arena would only be held after the competition. It wouldn't be too late for him to change into the formal attire his master had personally delivered after the competition. Lin Yuan and Lu Jie stored the clothes in the brocade box into the diamond face storage box. After bidding farewell to Wen Yu, Chu Ci, and the mother of Bloodbath, they left the return from faraway Manor and headed toward Yeong Palace. He was indeed going to reveal his identity at the Nix assembly. However, he wasn't in a hurry to appear as the Moon Empress disciple. The Nix assembly was Lin Yuan's most direct way to contact the top faction's younger generation, and his enemies, the Zheng family and the Miao family, were also attending. When it was time to suppress his enemies, Lin Yuan would never be soft-hearted. The murals were dazzling and the precious weapons were dazzling. Peerless beauties resided here, and the disorderly bamboos gave birth to elegance. In one of the rooms of the noble pavilion, a woman was stroking a purple bamboo with her head lowered. The woman's eyes drooped, and her hibiscus-like face was filled with guilt, causing the pearl earrings on her ears to lose their luster. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door of the woman's room. The woman turned to the door and saw a middle-aged woman with short hair walking in. Pavilion Master, according to my investigation, the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden will be sending a Pinnacle Class 4 Creation Master, Miao Qi, to attend the Great Night Assembly. The woman, who had been looking down with guilt on her face, immediately frowned when she heard this. A ruthless aura suddenly rose from his body. The Miao family has so many seniors in the Beast Creation Garden who can attend the Nix assembly, but the Miao family sent Miao Qi. He's clearly trying to make life difficult for me. The capable middle-aged short-haired woman quickly lowered her head, her eyelids twitching wildly. At the same time he thought to himself. I knew that mentioning the name Miao Qi would not end well. Every time the Pavilion Master hears the name Miao Qi he gets angry. But it makes sense. Lord Bamboo Monarch has been in love with the Pavilion Master for many years, but the Pavilion Master has always rejected Lord Bamboo Monarch because of his bad luck. Miao Qi used this opportunity to express his goodwill to Lord Bamboo Monarch time and time again. He even openly provoked Pavilion Master, saying that Pavilion Master and Lord Bamboo Monarch could never be together. This caused the Pavilion Master to lose his sense of propriety and agree to Lord Bamboo Monarch's pursuit, causing Lord Bamboo Monarch to be plagued with misfortune. The Pavilion Master was worried about this matter, but Miao Qi just had to jump out at this time to attend the Nix assembly. No matter what, Miao Qi is a Pinnacle Class 4 Creation Master. She wouldn't do anything inappropriate during the Great Night meeting, right? If that's the case, I really don't know what the Pavilion Master will do. Just as the middle-aged woman was lost in her thoughts, Wang Fuxiang spoke. "Ah Jing, go and pick out a few pieces of clothing that old thing Bamboo Monarch gave to me. In a while you'll be attending the meeting at Yalang Pavilion on my behalf." The short-haired middle-aged woman, Ah Jing, raised her head and looked at Wang Fuxiang in surprise. "Pavilion Master, are you going to?" Before Ah Jing could finish his sentence, Wang Fuxiang interrupted him with gritted teeth. "I originally didn't want to show my face at the Great Night meeting. After all, the rumors about me haven't stopped for the past few years. But now that things have come to this, Miao Qi wants to publicly make a cuckold of me in front of everyone in the Great Night meeting. She's going too far. Since Miao Qi wants to make a cuckold of me, then I'll give the entire Miao family a white jade fan that they must always hold in their hands for the next 2 generations." Upon hearing this, Ah Jing quickly tried to persuade Wang Fuxiang to calm down. But after thinking about it, if she could calm down, she wouldn't be the Pavilion Master. Ah Jing quickly replied. "Pavilion Master, Lord Bamboo Monarch said that he likes purple clothes the most. I'll go and bring all the purple clothes that Lord Bamboo Monarch gave to you." After speaking, Ah Jing prepared to go to Wang Fuxiang's cloakrooms, which had close to 1,000, to pick out the purple clothes that Lord Bamboo Monarch had given to her. Fortunately, the Pavilion Master only had a little more than 1,000 cloakrooms. If she had more, she might not even be able to find all the purple clothes before the end of the Great Night meeting. At the same time, Ah Jing couldn't help but feel sorry for Wang Fuxiang. His Pavilion Master was a person who valued love the most, but fate had made it so that the Pavilion Master's love life would only be an illusion. It was also thanks to Lord Bamboo Monarch's formidable strength and the fact that he was a Class 5 creation master who could concoct spirit fluids to alleviate the misfortune. Otherwise, the Pavilion Master would really kill a person with a kiss. Sob, sob, sob. "I haven't recovered from my illness. Everyone must take care of your health." End of this chapter. Chapter 821. After Ah Jing left, Wang Fuxiang lowered her head again and gently caressed the purple bamboo beside her. A teardrop fell from Wang Fuxiang's eyes and landed on the purple bamboo's leaf. However, the bamboo leaf did not seem to be able to bear the teardrop, so it gently carried the teardrop. The teardrop slid down the bamboo leaf and onto the bamboo stem before finally being hidden in the purple bamboo's roots. Wang Fuxiang lowered her head and looked at the purple bamboo as she murmured softly, "If only I could get rid of the body of misfortune." At this point, Wang Fuxiang's face revealed an indescribable bitterness. At this moment, Lin Yuan and Lu Jie had already reached the vicinity of Night Glory Palace. Night Glory Palace was different from the Radiant Moon Palace located on Leaning Moon Mountain. Night Glory Palace was built inside the royal capital. Outside of Night Glory Palace was a beast-head garden that occupied thousands of acres of land. The beast heads in the garden were all carved out of stone. Tens of thousands of stone beast heads were placed inside the garden. Together with the night iris planted on the ground, the entire Night Glory Palace looked like it was in the night even during the day. It was already past 6 o'clock at night, and the sky had just turned dark. However, as Lin Yuan walked through the beast head garden, he felt as though he was standing under the bright shadows of midnight lights. These stone beast heads all had glowing illum crystals in their mouths. The light emitted by the illum crystals was different from sunlight, so the picky night iris did not even bother to absorb the light emitted by the illum crystals. It was precisely because of this that the light from the illum crystals could illuminate the path from the beast head garden to Night Glory Palace. While walking through the beast head garden, Lin Yuan noticed that there were many figures around him. Most of these figures had outstanding auras and were dressed in appropriate spirit chi clothing. Night Glory Palace did not usually have attendants. Therefore, those who would appear in Night Glory Palace during the Nyx assembly would definitely come from a veteran faction, while those with higher status would come from an elite faction. Those with a higher status would be the true big shots who could be called Her Majesty. At this moment, Lin Yuan heard Lu Jie speak. Along the way, the grade of the stone beast head sculptures is getting higher and higher. Most of the beast head sculptures we see now are diamond phase. We should be out of the beast head garden after a short distance. Lu Jie could not help but complain. I wonder who designed Master's beast head garden. Why does it feel like I'm walking through a spirit beast cemetery? Lin Yuan subconsciously nodded in agreement. However, Lin Yuan immediately looked at Lu Jie in surprise. On one hand, he lamented that Lu Jie's retort was very vivid. On the other hand, she wondered if it was a good idea for Lu Jie to complain about his master's place of residence. After exiting the beast head garden, Lin Yuan found a different scene in front of him. The entire Yeong Palace was made of large stones that had been carefully designed. It was filled with a kind of solemn and crude beauty. The stone pillars and hanging beams were engraved with all kinds of spirit beasts. Lin Yuan took a few glances at the carvings on the stone pillars and hanging beams and keenly noticed that among the spirit beasts carved on the beams of Yiyang Palace, there were no dragon species fays. He did not know if Chief Guard Yi did not like dragon species fays or if there was some other reason. Since the Great Evernight Assembly's official meeting would start at midnight, before the official meeting would be the civil and martial arena, as well as the civil and martial arena. The people who came to participate in the Nix assembly could choose not to participate or watch the arena competition. Lu Jie was the main character of the Great Evernight Assembly, so it was a little late for him to participate in the Great Evernight Assembly at 6 o'clock. However, for the other veteran factions and top factions, this time was just right. However, the leaders and young disciples of the various veteran factions and top factions who had come to participate in the Great Evernight Assembly outside Yeong Palace held their breaths. Everyone realized that an ordinary-looking old man in a black robe was standing at the entrance of Yeong Palace. This old man's ordinary appearance was extraordinary in the eyes of the veteran factions and top factions. This old man was the left guard, Lord Zwaming, who usually followed the chief guard of the spirit guards, Night Leaning Moon. Lord Zwaming stood at the entrance of Yeong Palace with his hands behind his back. He should be waiting for someone. The younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions did not have so many thoughts, but the leaders of the older generation began to ponder. He did not know who was so prestigious as to make the left guard minister wait here specially. The various high lords should have already gathered in Yeong Palace a few days ago. In that case, the left guard was most likely waiting for someone from the younger generation. At this time, Sun Ningxiang had just stepped out of the Beast Head Garden. Although she felt extremely melancholic, her expression was still elegant and calm. When Du Immortal Garden received the invitation to the Great Evernight Assembly, Sun Ningxiang had predicted that she would definitely clash with the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden. At the same time, other than the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden, which was clearly interested in the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden, the other top factions might also have their eyes on the Du Immortal Garden. Sun Ningxiang did not like dealing with such a situation, but she had to deal with it. This was because the Sun family had no other suitable candidates to participate in the Great Evernight Assembly other than herself. However, Sun Ningxiang also felt a trace of anticipation in her melancholy. After her grandmother had obtained the legend-quality muscle revitalizing camellia from Sky City, the festering of her muscles had been alleviated. This was equivalent to directly relieving a lot of pressure on her grandmother. Her grandmother usually used spirit energy to wash her muscles and slow down the festering and decay of her muscles. Now that she had the legend-quality muscle revitalizing camellia to stop the festering of her muscles, new flesh had begun to grow in her originally festering muscles. If her grandmother could only live for 1 year, now that her muscles had partially recovered, it would not be a problem for her to live for 2 years as long as she did not use her strength to trigger the injuries on her soul spirit. Sun Ningxiang could not help but wonder if Sky City would also be invited to participate in the Great Evernight Assembly since they had so many Creation Master resources. Although the Du Immortal Garden and Sky City were just trading, Sun Ningxiang was still grateful to Sky City and that mysterious masked young man from the bottom of her heart. With the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden in such a precarious situation, the only force that was willing to help the Du Immortal Garden was Sky City, which did not take advantage of this opportunity to bite off a few pieces of the Du Immortal Garden's flesh. Just as Sun Ningxiang was letting her imagination run wild, she inadvertently saw 2 figures in front of her. These 2 figures caused Sun Ningxiang's eyes to narrow. The first one was even more terrifying. End of this chapter. Chapter 822. Sun Ningxiang saw 2 tall and well-proportioned men walking up the stone steps in front of Yeong Palace. One of the 2 men was dressed in a purple robe with bamboo patterns embroidered on it. The other wore a scarlet half-body armor that was riddled with scars of various sizes. The man in the purple robe had eyebrows that reached his temples. He was very handsome and there was a faint smile on his face. The other man in scarlet half-body armor had deep eyes and a serious expression. However, the mole on the tip of his nose made this stern-looking man appear obedient, as if he was an easy target to bully. At this time the left minister, Zwaming, who was standing in front of Yeong Palace, smiled and greeted the young man in the purple robe and scarlet half-body armor. Lord Gulang, Lord Zhongzhe, Lord Bamboo Monarch, and Lord Chef Supreme are still in a meeting inside Yeong Palace. If the 2 of you don't like crowds, why don't I bring you to the tea room in Yiyu Pavilion for some refreshments? or to the training room in Yiyu Pavilion to wait for the matches to begin. When Gu Lang heard Zhuo Ming's words, he immediately bowed politely. Zhongzhe nodded at the left minister, Zhuo Ming, and greeted him coolly. Gu Lang remembered that his master, Bamboo Monarch, was still in a meeting, so he glanced at the many young disciples of the veteran and top forces. He thought that there would be a lot of fun in the outer palace. Just as he was about to tell Zhuo Ming that he didn't want to go to Yiyu Pavilion, he heard Zhongzhe say, "Senior Zhuo Ming, please lead the way. Senior Zhuo Ming, please lead the way. Gu Lang and I can also use Yiyu Pavilion's training room to spar." Gu Lang and Zhongzhe were old friends, so he naturally knew what kind of person Zhongzhe was. Zhongzhe was a ruthless character who had almost killed his path protector. He was definitely a top battle maniac. If Gu Lang and Zhongzhe fought in Yiyu Pavilion's training room and made Zhongzhe excited, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to use his trump cards in the double arena. Just as Gu Lang was about to firmly reject Zhongzhe, he saw Zhongzhe put his hand on his shoulder and said with a fanatical look, "Gu Lang, don't worry. Master has already given me special training several times and taught me how to control my emotions during battle. This time our spar will definitely not go overboard. It won't affect the arena competition. When the time comes, we'll have a good fight in the civil and martial arena." Gu Lang looked at Zhongzhe skeptically when he heard this. Seeing the uncontrollable passion in Zhongzhe's eyes, Gu Lang felt that Zhongzhe's words were unreliable. But since Zhongzhe had invited him over and over again, Gu Lang couldn't refuse him. Thus, he simply gave up on the idea of eating melons in the outer hall and prepared to exchange a few blows with Zhongzhe in Yiyu Ting's training room. Thus, the left minister Zhuo Ming brought Zhongzhe and Gu Lang through the silent night corridor, a place that the veteran factions and peak factions were not allowed to enter during the Nix assembly, and headed for the Night Whisper Pavilion. At this moment, Sun Ningxiang noticed that the left minister, Zhuo Ming, had turned around to look behind him. Sun Ningxiang raised an eyebrow in surprise when she saw Zhuo Ming's actions. Zhuo Ming was the left chief official and was the bureau chief's right-hand man. Naturally, he wasn't a person who was hesitant. The fact that Zhuo Ming had turned around while bringing Zhongzhe and Gu Lang to the Night Whisper Pavilion meant that Gu Lang and Zhongzhe weren't the people Zhuo Ming was waiting for. The people Zhuo Ming was waiting for hadn't arrived, but Gu Lang and Zhongzhe's status had forced Zhuo Ming to receive them. From the looks of it, the identity of the people Zhuo Ming was waiting for was obvious. This Nix assembly was organized by the bureau chief for her disciple, and it was rumored that the Moon Empress had also accepted a disciple. From the looks of it, the left minister, Zhuo Ming, should be waiting for his young mistress or the Moon Empress disciple. Sun Ningxiang's eyes were fixed on Zhuo Ming, and she noticed that Zhuo Ming's gaze paused when he scanned the crowd. Sun Ningxiang quickly followed Zhuo Ming's gaze and immediately saw a man wearing the Spirit Guard standard mask at the end of Zhuo Ming's line of sight. Sun Ningxiang saw that the man wearing the Spirit Guard standard mask felt Zhuo Ming's gaze and gently shook his head. Zhuo Ming then turned around and continued to lead the way for Zhongzhe and Gu Lang. At that moment, almost everyone's eyes were on Gu Lang and Zhongzhe. These two were the Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme's treasures. They were also publicly recognized as the most qualified candidates to compete for the current Radiance envoys among the Radiance Federation's younger generation. They were existences that couldn't be seen even if one wanted to. Many of the young women from the veteran factions and pinnacle factions wished they could embed their gazes on Gu Lang and Zhongzhe. If it wasn't for the fact that they didn't dare to step forward and were afraid of offending the nobles, these women with glowing eyes would probably turn into octopuses and wrap around them tightly. However, Sun Ningxiang's attention wasn't on Zhongzhe and Gu Lang at all. After seeing Zhuo Ming's action, Sun Ningxiang's gaze never shifted away from them. Apart from Chief Guard Yi, only Chief Guard Ye's disciple could instruct Zhuo Ming by shaking his head. The left minister was loyal to Chief Guard Yi, and he represented Chief Guard Ye's will. Even if the Chef Supreme and Bamboo Monarch spoke, they couldn't instruct the left minister to do anything. After some thought, Sun Ningxiang was able to confirm the identity of the man wearing the Spirit Guard's mask. As for Lin Yuan, Sun Ningxiang only felt that his figure was vaguely familiar, so she took a few more glances at his face. Sun Ningxiang was certain that Lin Yuan was not a member of the top faction's younger generation, but she was not sure about his identity. Sun Ningxiang couldn't confirm Lin Yuan's identity, so she didn't think too much about it. She took a deep breath and walked up the stairs in front of Yiyang Palace. He was prepared to go to the outer palace to endure the storm that was bound to be caused by someone because of his arrival. Lin Yuan's body was enhanced by numerous willpower and laws, and his senses were far sharper than those of ordinary people. Therefore, when Sun Ningxiang looked at him, he keenly captured her gaze. After seeing Sun Ningxiang, Lin Yuan's face immediately revealed a smile. Lin Yuan turned to look at Lu Jie. "Brother Lu, why don't we stay in the outer palace of the Yaoyang Palace before the fight begins?" Lu Jie nodded in response and didn't say anything else. Instead, he subconsciously placed his hand on his chest where the Creation Master's retainer crest used to be. However, due to the Nyx assembly and Lin Yuan's request, Lu Jie took off the Creation Master's retainer crest, which he valued as much as his life, from his chest. Based on Lu Jie's understanding of Lin Yuan wasn't a person who liked to watch the fun. Therefore, Lin Yuan must have his own reasons for wanting to stay in the outer palace. The second night. There's still one more night. Sob, sob, sob. End of this chapter. Chapter 823. This purpose must be related to the development of Sky City, but Lu Jie was not good at socializing between factions. Recently, Lu Jie did not bother to study the development of Sky City's factions like before. Instead, he used his time apart from training to focus on the implementation of Sky City's white-clothed followers plan. Since he could not help Lin Yuan in the outer palace in a while, Lu Jie, who was by Lin Yuan's side, decided to fulfill his most essential duty. As a shield and sword, he would protect Lin Yuan's safety at the Nyx assembly. Lin Yuan and Lu Jie followed behind Sun Ningxiang and arrived at the outer palace through the stone pillar archway. Lin Yuan knew the situation and crisis that the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden was facing, but he did not expect someone to jump out as soon as Sun Ningxiang arrived at the outer palace. Every faction participating in the Nyx assembly had their faction's logo on their clothes. It was very rare to see people like Lin Yuan, who wore Spirit Chi clothes without any faction's logo. According to the logo on the Spirit Chi clothes, Lin Yuan could recognize the identity of the two young men in front of Sun Ningxiang. The two young men looked somewhat similar, with the iconic nose bridge and eyebrows. Just based on their appearance, it could be seen that they were definitely cousins, even if not biological brothers. However, based on their stands, it could be seen that they had completely different statuses. Upon seeing this scene, Lin Yuan could not help but reach out and touch his chin. The stage was actually set up so quickly. Moreover, the protagonists also stood on the stage as soon as it was set up. It was really fast. Among the two young men, the one standing opposite Sun Ningxiang and clashing with her aura was wearing purple Spirit Chi clothes. Lin Yuan had seen this purple Spirit Chi clothes before. It was the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden's iconic 100 Beast seedling attire. Based on the man's sleeves full of sprouts on the collar of the new 100 Beast seedling attire, he definitely had the most core identity among the young direct descendants of the Miao family. The young man next to the man in the new 100 Beast seedling attire was wearing a standard Creation Master attire. The man's Creation Master robe had a big Zheng written on the collar. According to the information on the Zheng family, this young man in the Creation Master robe must be the Zheng family's second young master, who had a feud with Lin Yuan. There were different arches in the outer palace and the inner palace of the Yaoyang Palace. The leaders of all the old and top powers had already gone to the inner palace. The outer palace was a place for the younger generation to interact. Therefore, this young man who was dressed in the new 100 Beast seedling costume of the Miao family spoke without much consideration. "Haha, Sun Ningxiang, you have been avoiding talking to me about working with the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden. This time we're standing face to face. I don't think you're going to keep me at arm's length." As he spoke, the man whistled lightly, appearing very frivolous. Among the younger generation of Yaoyang Palace's outer palace, most of them came here to make friends. After all, there weren't many opportunities to gather the younger generation of the various major powers. On the other hand, there were also some people who came to watch the show. Seeing that there were people here fighting tit for tat, many disciples of veteran forces came over. It was rare to see a direct descendant of a peak force make a fool of himself. Lin Yuan noticed that the Blissful Sea Clan's young master, Chi Haitao, was among these people. Lin Yuan was originally lamenting that the stage had just been set up, and the protagonists were already all on stage. Now even the supporting characters were on stage. Sun Ningxiang looked at the veteran faction disciples gathering around and the direct descendants of the other top factions who were watching the show. Her expression did not change. She took a deep breath and said, "Miao Zhua, the Du Immortal Garden has always been very principled. If someone wants to talk about working with us sincerely, the Du Immortal Garden will naturally not reject them. If someone wants to talk about working with us sincerely, the Du Immortal Garden will naturally not reject them." Upon hearing Sun Ningxiang's words, Miao Zhua's face darkened. Although Sun Ningxiang did not say it directly, it was obvious from her words that the Beast Creation Garden was not sincere about working with the Du Immortal Garden. Therefore, Sun Ningxiang had always avoided talking about it. This kind of thing was as clear as a mirror in everyone's heart, but they could never say it aloud. If Sun Ningxiang said it now, it would be equivalent to confirming that the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden was not sincere about working with others. In this place where the disciples of veteran factions and top factions were everywhere, Sun Ningxiang's words were basically equivalent to attacking the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden's credibility. Just as Miao Zhuo was about to retaliate, Sun Ningxiang spoke again. I, Sun Ningxiang, am the current clan head of Du Immortal Garden, the leader of a peak force. You, Miao Zhuo, are just one of the more favored disciples of the Miao family. Can you decide the development path of the Beast Creation Garden? Can it decide the allocation of the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden's creation master resources? If you can't even do that, what qualifications do you have to stand in front of me and talk about cooperation with me? If you want to talk about cooperation, tell your father, Miao Linxing, to come and talk to me personally. Sun Ningxiang's words immediately made Miao Zhuo's face turn as black as the bottom of a pot. Miao Zhuo glared at Sun Ningxiang and said coldly, "The Du Immortal Garden's forces are already riddled with holes. I'm afraid that even the veteran forces are inferior to them. You guys..." Before Miao Zhuo could finish his sentence, Sun Ningxiang interrupted him sternly. Sun Ningxiang's sharp gaze swept across the surroundings as she raised her voice. You're saying that my Sun family's Du Immortal Garden is inferior to the veteran forces? There are so many veteran forces here. You can casually ask around and see which of them dares to say that their forces are stronger than my Du Immortal Garden? Or you can ask the person beside you if their Jing family has our Sun family's strong forces? Sun Ningxiang completely unleashed her aura with just a few words and forcefully countered Miao Zhuo's provocation. As she spoke, Sun Ningxiang's fists were clenched tightly as she tried her best not to weaken her aura. Sun Ningxiang knew that if her aura weakened, the other observing top factions would feel that the Du Immortal Garden was really not going to make it. The Du Immortal Garden would then face an even greater crisis. At that moment, Miao Zhuo felt as though he was being held hostage by Sun Ningxiang. After all, the Du Immortal Garden had an Emperor-class expert presiding over it. This was also the main reason why the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden had never dared to make a move on the Du Immortal Garden. With an Emperor-class expert presiding over the Du Immortal Garden, no matter what happened, it was not something that the veteran forces could compare with. Under such circumstances, Miao Zhuo naturally would not be foolish enough to drag his cousin Zheng Kaiyuan into the water. At that moment, Miao Zhuo's eyes flickered, and he reached out and pointed in Lin Yuan's direction. The end of this chapter. Chapter 824. Miao Zhuo asked Lin Yuan, "That kid over there, tell us which faction is stronger among the top factions, the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden or the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden? That kid over there, I'll let you tell us which faction is stronger, the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden or the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden." Miao Zhuo's words made everyone present involuntarily look at Lin Yuan. Since Lin Yuan and Lu Jie had walked in behind Sun Ningxiang was immediately targeted by Miao Zhuo and became the center of the storm in the outer palace. Since Lin Yuan and Lu Jie had walked in behind Sun Ningxiang had been targeted by Miao Zhuo the moment she entered the outer palace and became the center of the storm in the outer palace. Lin Yuan's performance in the all-star match had been really outstanding. He had defeated a member of the Barbarian Snake Guild Club's main force without even summoning his Fae. Lin Yuan's performance in the all-star match had been really eye-catching. He had defeated a member of the Barbarian Snake Guild Club's main force without even summoning his Fae. It had already become a hot topic on Star Web. As a member of the younger generation, the veteran faction disciples and the top faction disciples naturally recognized Lin Yuan. In fact, many people had even specially inquired about Lin Yuan's identity before this. However, no matter how they inquired, there was no result. It was as though Lin Yuan had appeared out of thin air. This made those who had inquired about Lin Yuan even more curious. In this era where strength was equivalent to resources, even if a spirit chi professional was extremely talented, had a wide range of contracts with Faes, and could easily comprehend willpower runes, they would not be able to become stronger without sufficient resources. However, if he did not have enough resources, he would not be able to become stronger. This meant that Lin Yuan definitely had the support of massive resources. Now that Lin Yuan was qualified to attend the Nix assembly, it just proved this point. Seeing that Miao Zhuo had pointed the spearhead at him, Lin Yuan revealed a playful expression. The stage had originally been set up, and the leading and supporting roles were almost all there. However, he had not been given a chance to step on the stage. Lin Yuan had been secretly thinking about how to join in. Now that he had not done anything, Miao Zhuo's words had given him a legitimate chance to join. Sun Ningxiang's gaze also swept over Lin Yuan. When she saw him, she also saw Lu Jie, who was wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask. This caused Sun Ningxiang's forceful aura to suddenly tense up. Since Lin Yuan was traveling with the Spirit Guard's masked man, it meant that Lin Yuan and the masked man were friends. Regardless of Lin Yuan's identity, Miao Zhuo dragging Lin Yuan into the storm was equivalent to dragging the man wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask into the water. It wasn't a big deal to cause a disturbance among the younger generation at the Nyx assembly. But if the main character of the Nyx assembly was involved, that would be a huge mistake. The fact that his grandmother had killed 3 Pinnacle Class 4 Creation Masters had already incurred the displeasure of Chief Guard Yi. Because of this disturbance, if Bureau Chief Yi were to hold Bureau Chief Yi accountable, the Miao family's the arch-level experts could help Miao Zhuo plead for leniency. Furthermore, with his grandmother's current condition, she couldn't show her face in public no matter what. Otherwise, the greatest secret of the Sun family's Du Congealing Immortal Garden would be exposed to the world. Now, the Du Congealing Immortal Garden, which he had forcefully supported, would completely become fish meat for the other forces to feast on. Thinking of this, Sun Ningxiang felt that her aura could no longer be maintained. At this moment, Sun Ningxiang heard the clear voice of a young man. Naturally, there wouldn't be any veteran powers that are stronger than the Du Condensation Immortal Garden. Otherwise, those veteran powers would have long been promoted to peak powers. The old forces aren't fools. They all care about their reputation. Naturally, they don't like being compared to others like this. The young man's clear voice stunned Miao Zhuo, Sun Ningxiang, Zheng Kaiyuan, and the disciples from the old and peak forces. Then their gazes changed. More people from the outer palace of Yeang Palace gathered in this small circle. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Miao Zhuo had purposely chosen someone who didn't have a mark on him. This method was also to prevent the veteran forces that he had named from making things difficult for them and forming enmity with them. At the same time, Miao Zhuo's question directly changed the concept of his conversation with Sun Ningxiang. He made the comparison between the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden and the veteran factions into a comparison between the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden. When the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden was at its peak, it was naturally not afraid of the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden. It was ranked in the top 20 among the top 50 factions. However, now that the Du Immortal Garden's Creation Master resources had been depleted, it was already at the bottom of the top factions and could not be compared to the Beast Creation Garden at all. Furthermore, the Beast Creation Garden was known for its Creation Master resources. In the eyes of ordinary people, the Beast Creation Garden was often more impressive than the other top factions. However, Miao Zhuo didn't expect that the person he had casually picked would not continue with his words. Instead, he had answered the question that he had wanted to avoid. It would have been fine if that was the case, but the person he had pointed out had said that the veteran factions didn't want to be mentioned and compared to others. Wasn't this the same as saying that he didn't put the veteran factions in his eyes and was pulling the veteran factions' hatred out of thin air? With this thought, the anger in Miao Zhuo's heart burned. If they weren't in the outer palace of Yeang Palace, Miao Zhuo really wanted to grab Lin Yuan's collar and slap him a few times. Why didn't he just ask Lin Yuan who he was talking to? Miao Zhuo still had some reservations about Sun Ningxiang, but he didn't intend to be polite to Lin Yuan, who didn't even have a faction mark on him. Miao Zhuo looked at Lin Yuan and said in a gloomy tone, "Since you know that the old factions want face, then you should know that the Beast Creation Garden wants face even more." As soon as Miao Zhuo finished speaking, he saw the young man looking in a direction in the crowd and speaking unhurriedly. The Miao family's Beast Creation Garden wants face, but it doesn't seem to be very successful. Even the veteran factions that you look down on don't give face to the Beast Creation Garden. Some of the veteran factions even brought the Beast Creation Garden's breach of contract to the Spirit Guards. No matter how much the Beast Creation Garden cares about their reputation, they won't give any less compensation. Miao Zhuo's eyes immediately fixed on the Blissful Sea Clan's young family head, Qi Haitao. Upon seeing Qi Haitao, Miao Zhuo's eyes instantly turned red. Miao Zhuo's bloodshot eyes startled Qi Haitao. The conflict with the Blissful Ocean Tribe was the greatest humiliation to the Miao family. However, the Blissful Sea Clan had spent a huge sum of money to form an alliance with the Five Emperors mercenary group. The Blissful Sea clan had paid the 5 Emperors mercenary group a large amount of resources and bought a few islands, while the 5 Emperors mercenary group was responsible for the safety of the Blissful Sea clan members and the island's businesses. The first was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 825. With the 5 the Arch mercenaries around, the Miao family's beast creation garden would not be able to attack the Blissful Ocean tribe. Otherwise they would have to face the 5 the Arch mercenaries. This was why the Blissful Sea clan could still be invited by the Nyx assembly to appear in the Night Palace. Miaozhua said coldly to Chi Haitao. The people from the Sea of Bliss tribe aren't hiding on the island obediently. Are they here at the Nyx assembly to find some creation teachers to cooperate with them? Miaozhua's expression was cold, but his tone was calm. When he spoke to Chi Haitao, his aura was restrained. But from Miaozhua's calm tone, everyone present could feel the killing intent. They knew that the storm had turned into a conflict when the youth mentioned Chi Haitao. Seeing Miaozhua's reaction, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a trace of satisfaction. Now Chi Haitao had no choice but to open his mouth and sing on the stage. Lin Yuan did not want the Blissful Ocean tribe to get involved in this conflict and make the Miao family's beast creation garden feel pressured. To be honest, the Blissful Ocean tribe could not make the Miao family feel pressured. Lin Yuan did this because he wanted to escalate the conflict. On the other hand, he wanted the Blissful Ocean tribe to feel more pressure from the Miao family's beast creation garden. The more pressure the Blissful Ocean tribe felt, the closer they would cooperate with Sky City. It would also be more urgent to pour resources into nurturing the angelfish of Blissful. This way the aurora pollen that Lin Yuan bought from the market would be more useful. Sun Ningxiang did not know why, but when she heard the youth's clear voice, she suddenly felt a trace of courage. Sun Ningxiang's aura that was about to collapse instantly propped up. When Sun Ningxiang saw Lin Yuan outside the Night Palace, she felt that he looked familiar. Later, she remembered that he was the youth who had appeared at the All-Star match. But then, Sun Ningxiang was puzzled. He had indeed watched the All-Star competition, but a single match wasn't enough to give him a sense of familiarity. He had definitely met this youth named Lin Yuan before. After hearing Lin Yuan's voice, Sun Ningxiang suddenly felt that this youth's voice was very similar to that of the masked youth in Sky City. Looking at their figures, they were almost the same. Then Sun Ningxiang carefully sized up Lin Yuan's chin and silently sketched an image in her heart. Sun Ningxiang tried to imagine the strange mask on Lin Yuan's face and compared it with the appearance of the Sky City youth in her memory. After comparing, Sun Ningxiang's eyes lit up, because the two of them almost perfectly overlapped in her heart. In this world, there were indeed situations where two people were very similar. It was indeed child's play to determine whether two people were the same person based on their appearance and voice. Sky City and the Miao family's beast creation garden had quite a feud because of the Dew Immortal Garden. The Miao family's beast creation garden had been using all sorts of methods to pressure Sky City. If this young man was really from Sky City, then everything he said about the Miao family's beast creation garden could be explained. Sun Ningxiang was a master of words. The first time she discussed cooperation with the masked youth in Sky City, she discovered that the masked youth was hostile to the Blissful Sea tribe. It coincided with how Lin Yuan had inadvertently dragged the Blissful Sea clan's young family head, Chi Haitao, into the vortex. It may be a coincidence that there is one point of doubt in a question. If many points of doubt and evidence pointed to the same point, then that point was most likely the truth. Sun Ningxiang subconsciously moved half a step in Lin Yuan's direction and then lowered her breath, preparing to see the situation before making a response. Miaozhua had called out Chi Haitao, so he knew that Miaozhua was going to find trouble with him. When the Blissful Sea tribe had brought the contract to the spirit guards to ask for compensation from the Miao family's beast creation garden, they were already destined to fall out with the beast creation garden. There was no room for negotiation. Since there was no room for negotiation, there was no use in humbling himself. He would only be humiliated for no reason. Therefore Chi Haitao became tough and looked at Miaozhua. The Blissful Sea tribe has always been doing things according to the rules. It was your beast creation garden that violated the contract first. The Blissful Sea tribe just wants to get the compensation after your beast creation garden violated the contract. As for finding creation master resources, the Blissful Sea tribe really doesn't need them. After cooperating with Sky City, the Blissful Sea tribe's creation master resources have already overflowed. However, young Master Miao is right about the word, cooperation. The Blissful Sea tribe has bred a large number of supreme-grade angelfish of Blissful, and soon, they will start auctioning high-quality angelfish of Blissful. If any faction wants to conduct a large transaction with the Blissful Sea tribe, they can come to me, Chi Haitao. Chi Haitao spoke very loudly, and it was also an opportunity to advertise for the Blissful Sea tribe. He wanted to see if he could get some cooperation. Even though the Blissful Sea tribe was being suppressed by the Beast Creation Garden, many factions that had cooperated with the Blissful Sea tribe had received a warning from the Beast Creation Garden and started to distance themselves from the Blissful Sea tribe. They had even cut off all contact with the Blissful Sea tribe. If it was in the past, Chi Haitao would definitely be very concerned about such a heavy blow to his connections. But now, even if no faction had a good relationship with the Blissful Sea tribe, as long as the Blissful Sea tribe could maintain the cooperation with Sky City, the Blissful Sea tribe's development would definitely not be bad. After all, the Blissful Sea tribe had a monopoly on the angelfish of Blissful Market. Spirit-type Fays might be considered rare among the Fays, but the Radiance Federation still had a huge base of spiritual-type Fays. With a spiritual-type Fay around, they would definitely need the angelfish of Blissful Sea tribe's clothes, which could be mass-produced. Therefore, once the Blissful Sea tribe solved the problem of Creation Master resources, they wouldn't need to be afraid of the Beast Creation Garden's suppression and the severing of their connections. The situation might be like this, but Chi Haitao's words made Miao Zhua, who was already burning with rage, unable to suppress his temper. Miao Zhua shifted his gaze back to Lin Yuan. He then scanned Lin Yuan and Chi Haitao a few times before saying, "There is still some time before the martial arena. Why don't the three of us follow the martial arena's rules and have some fun at the arena over there?" Everyone who was watching the show immediately knew that Miao Zhua couldn't help but want to make a move. The martial arena's rules stated that as long as the opponent wasn't killed, before the opponent admitted defeat, the opponent could make any kind of attack. When the martial arena officially started, there would definitely be experts on the arena to control the situation. They would try their best to ensure that the loser wouldn't suffer serious injuries if one side was defeated. If Miao Zhua's challenge was accepted, he would definitely be ruthless during the fight. The second round, end of this chapter. Chapter 826. The onlookers really hoped that Miao Zhuo's battle would proceed smoothly. The conflict between the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden and the Blissful Ocean clan was old news. No one was interested in it. However, everyone was very curious about Lin Yuan's strength. As the favored core disciple of the Beast Creation Garden, Miao Zhuo's ability was far superior to that of Meng Su from the Savage Snake Guild Club. As a B-rank Spirit Chi professional, Miao Zhuo should have used the Starlight Ji-Tan to temper his Fays. In that case, Miao Zhuo's strongest Fay would be a Diamond/Fantasy breed. If he were to fight Miao Zhuo, the mysterious Fay that he had not summoned during the All-Star match should reveal itself. At this moment, Zheng Kaiyuan, who was standing beside Miao Zhuo, reached out his hand to pull Miao Zhuo and whispered in his ear. "Cousin, I heard from my mother that you have been following grandfather for the past few months to increase your strength as a creation master. You are just one step away from becoming a Class 4 creation master. You might not know, but the young man in front of you is the one who injured the main members of the club that my cousin invested in." Miao Zhuo furrowed his brows. Although Miao Zhuo had been in seclusion for a few months, he had logged into the Star Web quite a few times during the 10 days he had been in the royal capital. Miao Zhuo, who loved reading his posts, had more or less heard about Lin Yuan's situation. However, Miao Zhuo did not know what Lin Yuan looked like since he had never watched the All-Star match. Otherwise he would not have pointed Lin Yuan out. At that moment, a figure suddenly approached him and gave him a bear hug. Gao Feng looked at Lin Yuan and said, "I just sent you a few text messages but you didn't reply. So you got into a conflict here." After speaking, Gao Feng stood beside Lin Yuan naturally and frowned at Miao Zhuo. "Miao Zhuo, Lin Yuan is my brother. Finding trouble with Lin Yuan is the same as finding trouble with me, Gao Feng." Gao Feng's actions showed that he and Lin Yuan were very familiar with each other. Otherwise, as a disciple of a top faction, Gao Feng would not have stood firmly by Lin Yuan's side when he saw Lin Yuan and Miao Zhuo going against each other. Lin Yuan felt warmth in his heart when he saw Gao Feng's actions. When Lin Yuan interacted with others, as long as he was sure of their relationship, he would wholeheartedly invest. Gao Feng's actions also proved that Gao Feng wasn't lying when he said that he was his brother. In his heart, Gao Feng had treated Lin Yuan as a good brother. Otherwise, Gao Feng wouldn't have stood firmly by his side in the face of a top force that was stronger than the Gao family. Gao Feng didn't know that Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple. The disciples of the top forces and veteran forces were all shocked by Gao Feng's sudden appearance and actions. Gao's Feng. I've never heard of any conflict between the Gao and Miao families. However, Gao Feng and Lin Yuan's familiarity also indicated that Lin Yuan's identity was definitely extraordinary. It was just that most of the younger generation of the 50 top factions present knew each other, but they had never heard of Lin Yuan. Miao Zhu's frown deepened when he saw Gao Feng suddenly choose a side. On one hand, he guessed that Gao Feng chose a side because of Lin Yuan on the surface. On the other hand, could it be related to the Sun family's due Immortal Garden? On the other hand, he was facing two pinnacle factions, a veteran faction and Lin Yuan, whose identity was unknown. Miao Zhu could not help but be in a difficult position. Miao Zhu didn't know what to do with two top factions, a veteran faction and Lin Yuan. Long Tao and Li Xian walked to Lin Yuan's side and greeted him warmly. Long Tao and Li Xian walked to Lin Yuan's side and greeted him warmly. Long Tao and Li Xian walked to Lin Yuan's side and greeted him. At this time, many of the veteran forces disciples who were watching the show had already cried out in surprise. It was rare for Lin Yuan to be friends with Gao Feng, but they didn't expect him to be so familiar with Long Tao and Li Xian. Gao Feng's reaction showed that he was not familiar with Long Tao and Li Xian, which meant that Lin Yuan didn't know them because of Gao Feng. Li Xian was fine. Li Yun Niaocan was developing quickly, but it didn't have an emperor-class expert. It was only a lower-middle existence among the top factions. But Long Tao was completely different. Long Tao was the Long family's Coiled Dragon Valley's only direct descendant and the recognized young family head. Just like Gao Feng, his words and actions represented the faction he belonged to. Long Tao was not only the Coiled Dragon Valley's young family head but also the Radiance 100 Sequences Sequence 3. He had always been arrogant and would spit out yin and yang auras whenever he opened his mouth. Many top faction disciples had been disgusted by Long Tao's yin and yang auras. Long Tao didn't think much of the other top faction's members. However, Long Tao had placed his hand on Lin Yuan's shoulder naturally, which was truly shocking. Li Xian looked at Lin Yuan with undisguised gratitude and respect. This made Lin Yuan's identity even more thought-provoking. Seeing Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian looking for him, Lin Yuan knew that as long as Miao Zhu wasn't stupid, this storm was destined to end. Lin Yuan couldn't help but sigh. He had used the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden to pressure the Blissful Sea clan. However, this storm didn't happen. It was still a little short of Lin Yuan's plan. After greeting Lin Yuan, Li Xian looked at Miao Zhu and said coldly, "Targeting Lin Yuan is targeting me." Li Xian's words might be simple, but they were very imposing. As soon as Li Xian finished speaking, Long Tao picked up where Li Xian left off and opened his thin lips towards Miao Zhu. "I heard that Master Miao Qi specially brought you here this time. I'm afraid Master Miao Qi knows that you've been causing trouble here and offended people you shouldn't have. Is he regretting not leaving you in the Beast Creation Garden and bringing Miao Zhu and Miao He here? Miao Zhu and Miao He are actually much stronger than you in this generation of the Miao family." Upon hearing Long Tao and Li Xian's words, Miao Zhu snorted with a livid expression and tried his best to comfort himself. Long Tao's mouth was the crotch of cotton pants. Long Tao's mouth was a stinky latrine pit. Long Tao's mouth was a big sauce bowl. After forcefully calming his anger, Miao Zhu pointed at Qi Haitao. "Qi Haitao will settle our matters after the next conference." Then Miao Zhu pointed at Lin Yuan's nose. Just as Miao Zhu was about to say, "As for you," a shadow that seemed to be entangled with a soul shot toward Miao Zhu's finger. Then the shadow collided with Miao Zhu's hand that was pointing at Lin Yuan, causing Miao Zhu's hand and arm to curl up strangely. Third chapter. Seeking recommendation votes. Monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 827. His hand and arm curled together and let out a crisp cracking sound. Then there was an ear-piercing sound of friction. Miao Zhu, who had just pointed his finger at Lin Yuan's nose, immediately let out a miserable howl. The fingers were connected to the heart, and it would cause one to grimace in pain if one's fingers collided with anything. Moreover, Miao Zhu's fingers, palm and forearm had bent into a spiral arc. Just by looking at the arc of Miao Zhu's arm, anyone with a discerning eye would know that the bones in his arm must have been broken. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a complete bone rod to twist into such a strange arc. As Miao Zhu let out a heart-wrenching howl, a misty soul shadow gathered on Miao Zhu's shoulder like drifting orchid petals. An elegant mantis with a strange soul shadow wrapped around its body and a pair of orchid petal-like blades appeared on Miao Zhu's neck. The petite and elegant mantis looked no more than 7 or 8 centimeters long, but its body emitted a powerful soul wave. The mantis gently sucked in the direction of Miaojua's head, and there seemed to be a faint shadow being pulled out of Miaojua's body. The instant the petite mantis sucked in the direction of Miaojua's head, Miaojua's miserable howl stopped. The more intense soul pain made Miaojua's vocal cords spasm, and he could not make any sound. Just as the shadow-like thing in Miaojua's body was pulled out, a layer of faint golden light suddenly appeared on Miaojua's body. Then the shadow that was about to be pulled out slowly shrank back into Miaojua's body. Just as the petite and elegant mantis and the golden light were about to start a tug-of-war over the shadow, the petite mantis orchid-like blades suddenly slashed across the shadow. The blades cut off a piece of the shadow. After the petite mantis sucked the shadow into its mouth with satisfaction, it turned into an orchid-like shadow. When the petite mantis appeared again, it had landed on Miaojua's shoulder. As early as when this petite mantis had attacked Miaojua, Lin Yuan had already used Morbius True Data to check on this petite mantis. Fey name: Orchid Petal Blade Mantis, Dead Soul Centipede. Fey species: Centipede genus / wingless insect. Fey grade: Diamond, 10 out of 10. Fey type: Spiritual. Fey quality: Legend skills. Frowny Fey soul absorption. Uses the power of absorbing souls to pull out the soul hidden in the target's mind. Soul attached death seed. A soul seed is produced in the depths of a living being's mind. The soul seed will completely fuse with the soul, and when the body dies, it can choose any target with the soul seed to devour and occupy the target's body. Soul exploding death bullet. Induces the soul seed in the target's body to mutate. After occupying the target's soul, the target's body will self-destruct. The soul seed will split into seeds during the explosion and spread through the explosion. Soul refining body. Increases the strength of one's own soul by absorbing the power of souls. After possessing and occupying the target's soul and taking complete control of the target's strength will increase according to the strength of one's own soul. Dead soul ferryman. Emits a deep soul voice that can control the living target's soul. Through powerful soul tremors, the target's soul will be in an unstable state and increase the soul absorption's effect. Soul jade attachment. Erupts the body's soul power in an instant, turning the soul body into jade. When the jade transformed soul body shatters, there will be a soul attack that surpasses the body's soul strength. At the same time, the shattered soul jade will instantly turn into a soul mist that will rise and infect all living beings in the area and form a soul seed in all living beings' bodies. Exclusive skill: Frowny Face Dead Soul Immortality. When the body is killed and there is no soul seed to use, the dead soul caterpillar's soul will leave the body and drift in a certain space. When there are enough living beings in this space die, the dead soul caterpillar's floating soul will be revived by infecting the dead soul's power. After looking at the orchid petal blade centipede or dead soul caterpillar's true data, Lin Yuan could not help but nod inwardly. After Lu Jie's insect queen had mutated, Lin Yuan had not had the chance to spar with him. However, Lin Yuan had checked the insect queen's true data and knew that it could use the blade queen bee's spiritual toxin to control other insect species phase. Previously, Lu Jie was unable to contract phase due to the insect queen's characteristics, causing him to be lacking in versatility in combat. Now that the insect queen had gained control of the blade queen bee's spiritual toxin, Lu Jie was able to break the previous restriction. Right now, the insect queen was like a contractor that could use the blade queen bee's spiritual toxin to contract insect species phase. However, the insect queen's contracted insect species phase total spiritual energy could not surpass the insect queen's. Otherwise, the insect queen would die from the spiritual energy backlash. Under such circumstances, it would not be a problem for Lu Jie to allow the insect queen to contract 8 or 10 insect species phase. As a spiritual type fairy source type lifeform, the insect queen's spiritual energy was far superior to ordinary phase and source type lifeforms. However, compared to ordinary insect species phase, insect species carcinoma phase were undoubtedly a better choice for Lu Jie. This was because the majority of carcinoma phase spiritual energy was very chaotic. Even though this dead soul caterpillar's soul was abnormally powerful, its spiritual energy was still inferior to the flesh-mincing blade insects that the insect queen had casually produced. It was also thanks to Lu Jie being the chief guard's disciple. Otherwise, even if Lin Yuan thought that the insect queen would be the best choice to contract insect species carcinoma phase, he would not be able to obtain any. The only carcinoma phase that Lin Yuan had was the sea burial lotus flower, which he had obtained by chance. The spirit guards were very strict in controlling things like carcinoma phase. Lu Jie had always told Lin Yuan about his growth in detail and had never forgotten his duty as a retainer knight. Lin Yuan knew that Lu Jie now controlled 8 abnormally powerful insect species carcinoma phase. Every insect species carcinoma phase would be able to cause a disaster. The orchid petal blade mantis was controlled by the insect queen's contracted insect species carcinoma phase, the dead soul caterpillar. Earlier on, the orchid petal blade mantis controlled by the dead soul caterpillar had used its normal ability, soul absorption, on Miaozhua. Miaozhua's body was glowing with golden light, and it should be a soul-protecting treasure that the Beast Creation Garden's elders had prepared for Miaozhua. However, under the sudden attack of the Diamond X/Legend Dead Soul Caterpillar, that soul-protecting treasure was not enough to protect Miaozhua. Miaozhua's soul was still injured. Everything happened in a flash, and everyone, including Long Tao, Li Xian and Gao Feng, were stunned by Lu Jie's sudden attack. The first attack was even more shocking. End of this chapter. Chapter 828. No one would have thought that someone would dare to make a move in the outer palace of Yeang Palace. Not only did this man not care about the Beast Creation Garden behind Miaozhua, but he also did not care that this was Yeang Palace. Even if Long Tao and Li Xian knew Lin Yuan's identity, it would not be appropriate for Lin Yuan to make a move outside Yeang Palace. Yeang Palace was the palace of the Chief Guard, Night Leaning Moon, and it was equivalent to Chief Guard Ye's home. Even if Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple, he would still be disrespecting Chief Guard Yi by making a move in her home. However, this change was not caused by Lin Yuan, but by the man wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask who had been following Lin Yuan. Long Tao and Li Xian weren't fools. They looked at each other and had a faint guess about the identity of the Spirit Guard's masked man beside Lin Yuan. However, others who did not know Lin Yuan's identity did not think so. Chi Haitao, who was already trapped in this storm, began to chatter. He was cursing Lu Jie for being a fool. This matter was already over. Miaozhua had said that he would deal with him after the Nix assembly. At most he would beat him up. With the experts of the 5 Thearchs mercenary team guarding him outside Yeang Palace, if Miaozhua wanted to hurt him, the experts would definitely stop him. After all, the Sea of Bliss had taken out a lot of resources to reach a protection agreement with the 5 Thearchs mercenary team. Chi Haitao was already prepared to be beaten up, but he didn't expect a new change to happen in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Chi Haitao looked at Lu Jie with hatred. He could not help but want to jump up and ask Lu Jie, "Making a move in the outer palace of Yeang Palace? Don't you know who you are and whether you deserve it?" Now, everyone, including Sun Ningxiang from Du Congealing Immortal Garden, was destined to suffer. A normal person would have fainted when their soul was injured, but Miaozhua could barely stay awake because he had a treasure to protect his soul. The pale Miaozhua said in a hoarse voice to the dumbfounded Zheng Kaiyuan, "Cousin, give me a hand." Zheng Kaiyuan came back to his senses and pulled Miaozhua up from the ground. Zheng Kaiyuan asked the pale-faced Miaozhua in a low voice when he regained his senses, "Cousin, I'll go to the inner palace to find Master." Looking at the injuries on Miaozhua's soul, Zheng Kaiyuan was completely flustered. Zheng Kaiyuan had always been insufferably arrogant in Indigo Azure City as the second young master of the Zheng family, but in a place like Yeang Palace's outer palace, any random person would at least be from a veteran faction. Zheng Kaiyuan's arrogance as the Zheng family's second young master had long since disappeared. Miaozhua ignored Zheng Kaiyuan and glared at Lu Jie, who was wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask. Even now he still couldn't understand. "How dare you suddenly attack me?" Miaozhua's soul was injured, and the pain penetrated deep into his bones. He couldn't understand what was happening. In a place like this where he could no longer tolerate it, he still had to grit his teeth and endure it. Did the other party eat the heart of a bear or the heart of a leopard? He actually dared to attack directly? Did this person not want to live? He was clearly ready to find a way out of the situation, but why was he still attacked by the other party? Lu Jie stood in front of Lin Yuan looking like a staunch guard. Since the Spirit Guard's masks had a voice-changing effect, Lu Jie's voice sounded a little strange. However, this strange voice was extremely firm and stern. At the same time, Lu Jie's words caused everyone present to gasp involuntarily. "You shouldn't have pointed your finger at the tip of his nose. If there's a next time, you'll be dead." Miaozhua couldn't react for a moment when he heard Lu Jie's answer. He only felt that Lu Jie's answer was simply too ridiculous. If this had happened outside, even if someone said something bad about him, he would definitely make the offending person pay with his life, let alone someone pointing at his nose. However, the problem was that this was Yeang Palace. After the surrounding veteran factions and top factions' disciples heard Lu Jie's words, many of them could not help but exclaim, Fuck. This person's words were simply too arrogant. He didn't take Yeong Palace seriously at all. At that moment, two figures appeared behind Miao Zhua. One of them asked Lu Jie in a cold voice. You dare to attack in Yeong Palace? Good job. Even if there are no attendants in Yeong Palace, the left and right governors are still in Yeong Palace presiding over matters. The other figure first checked Miao Zhua's injuries and subconsciously wanted to summon a fei to heal Miao Zhua's arm. However, when he recalled that this was Yeong Palace, he immediately stopped what he was doing. In Yeong Palace, it was against the rules to summon a fei without permission, even if it was a healing-type fei. When Miao Zhua saw the two people walking in front of him, he weakly nodded at them. Zheng Kaiyuan, who was at the side, quickly greeted them. However, only one of them nodded at Zheng Kaiyuan in response, while the other completely ignored Zheng Kaiyuan's existence. Long Tao, who saw the two of them, immediately stood up and said to the man who asked the question. Du Shura Fang He, it's not easy to meddle in other people's business. Don't get yourself into trouble by meddling in other people's business. Du Shua was a young core disciple of the Hearthstone Metals faction. Among the top 50 factions, the Hearthstone Metals faction was in the top 10, just like the Long family that he was from. They controlled a large number of metals and spiritual ingredients, and the entire faction was abnormally low profile. Fang He was from the four-legged beast region, which might not be comparable to the Long family, but it also had a large number of beast-type feis. In terms of overall strength, it was much stronger than Li Xian's Black Cloud Bird region. He had heard that Du Shua and Fang He had a very good relationship, just like Siamese twins. However, he had never heard of any relationship between Du Shua and Fang He and Miao Zhua. Now that Du Shua and Fang He were standing behind Miao Zhua, it seemed like the Hearthstone Metals, the four-legged beast region, and the Beast Creation Garden were going to cooperate. In Long Tao's opinion, Du Shua and Fang He were really unlucky. As long as he announced his identity, Du Shua and Fang He were destined to be punished by their elders when they returned to the faction for standing up for Miao Zhua. Moreover, the four-legged beast region, the Hearthstone Metals, and the Beast Creation Garden had to consider the impact of this storm. When Du Shua heard Long Tao's words, his face darkened and he mocked. Long Tao, you better take care of yourself. After saying that, Du Shua ignored Long Tao and continued to look at Lu Jie. There is a price to pay for being impulsive. You have to consider whether you can afford this price. Lu Jie stepped forward under everyone's gaze and asked Du Shua in a deep voice, you have to pay a price for being impulsive. Why can't I afford to deal with an unwelcome guest in my own home? There was a second watch and a third watch later. Sob, 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 sob. End of this chapter. Chapter 829. Lu Jie's words did not cause the slightest ripple at first, but everyone immediately realized what he meant. This man wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask actually said that Knight Independence Palace was his home. This man's identity was obvious. He must be the disciple of the Spirit Guard's Chief Guard Knight Leaning Moon. Presumably, no one in the world would dare to pretend to be Chief Guard Knight Leaning Moon's disciple in Knight Independence Palace. Although Long Tao and Li Xian had already guessed it, they still could not help but look surprised. They could not help but take a few more glances at Lu Jie. Gao Feng, who was about to ask his father to help Lin Yuan plead with Chief Guard Knight, was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. He did not expect the main character of this Knight Assembly to be by his side, but he did not know it all. Then Gao Feng looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. Lin Yuan could travel with Chief Guard Knight's disciple, and the disciple even stood up for him. What exactly was his identity? Even if Gao Feng had always been a little insensitive, he now realized that Lin Yuan's identity was probably completely different from what he had imagined. Everyone's gazes, which were originally looking at Lu Jie for fun, changed after he revealed his identity. The veteran factions and the top faction's disciples did not expect that the originally simple-minded person would actually turn into a true dragon. Most of the people present fixed their gazes on Lu Jie. At the same time, they were wondering if they could have a chance to talk to Lu Jie in a while. While some people were surprised, their gazes did not change. However, the target had shifted from Lu Jie to Miao Zhua, Du Shua, and Fang He. Miao Zhua had been injured by Chief Guard Knight's disciple for nothing. Moreover, Chief Guard Knight's disciple had called Miao Zhua an unwelcome guest. The term unwelcome guest really made people have wild thoughts. Unwelcome guests naturally had to be chased out. If Miao Zhua was chased out of the Knight Assembly, would it implicate Master Miao Qi, who had led the Miao family's team to participate in the Knight Assembly? Du Shua and Fang He, who had just spoken up for Miao Zhua, suddenly turned pale after knowing Lu Jie's identity. Then they hurriedly took a big step to the side to stay away from Miao Zhuo. The relationship between the Hearthstone Metals and the Four-Legged Beast region was very similar to that between Coiling Dragon Valley and Dawn Cloudbird region. Hearthstone had been supporting the Four-Legged Beast region all these years, just like how Coiling Dragon Valley had been supporting Black Cloud Niao, Kansas. The relationship between Du Shuo and Fang He was very similar to the relationship between Long Tao and Li Xian. However, the relationship between Du Shuo and Fang He was much closer than the relationship between Long Tao and Li Xian. This was because Fang He, who was born in the Four-Legged Beast region, had been raised in a Hearthstone since he was young. Fang He had been Du Shuo's inseparable playmate since he was young. Du Shuo was the main attacker on the contracted Fei, while Fang He followed behind him and silently healed him. The relationship between the two was even closer than that of brothers from ordinary families. When Hearthstone was developing the underground dimensional rift, it had discovered a secret that required a large amount of Creation Master resources. Hence, he found the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden, which also had the intention to work with Hearthstone. However, the benefits involved in the cooperation were too great, and the two sides had yet to reach an agreement. Du Shuo and Fang He finally got in touch with Miao Zhuo in private when the various top-notch forces gathered in the royal capital. Miao Zhuo was not even considered a friend to the two of them. The two of them had helped Miao Zhuo because they wanted to use this opportunity to get the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden to make concessions in the future cooperation. Du Shuo revealed a trace of a bitter smile. He had just said that impulsiveness would have to pay the price. Now the price had fallen on him. Even retribution would not come so quickly. Du Shuo and Fang He, who had been implicated, looked at Miao Zhuo with eyes full of disgust. It was a small matter that they had stood up for Miao Zhuo, but their words had been very rude to Chief Guard Ye's disciple. Du Shuo could not help but subconsciously put his hand on his buttocks when he thought of the strict elders in his family. Du Shuo only hoped that his father would not beat up the 2 kilograms of flesh on his buttocks. If that happened, he would have to trouble Fang He to heal him again. At that moment, a sharp pressure swept across the outer palace of Night End Palace. Under this pressure, everyone present was like a lonely flame in the cold night. Miao Zhuo, whose soul was already injured, could not support his body's weight even with Zheng Kaiyuan's support. He collapsed to the ground. However, this pressure stopped abruptly when it arrived in front of Lu Jie and Lin Yuan. Under this pressure, an ordinary-looking man walked in the outer palace of Night End Palace with a gloomy expression. When he saw who it was, Du Shuo immediately cursed inwardly. Among the spirit guards, the right guard's temper was obviously better than the left guard's. The left guard had always been managing the spirit guard's and cleansing pond for Chief Guard Yi. He could be said to be a great demon king of the spirit guards. If the left guard was here to deal with this storm, they would probably be in big trouble. Even the elders in the inner palace might be implicated. The left guard was merciless. It was a small matter if they were thrown out of Night End Palace. If the elders were also thrown out of Night End Palace, it would be a huge loss of face. Even though Du Shuo was his father's only son, he could not help but feel that if his father was thrown out of Night End Palace because of him, once he returned home, his father would definitely strangle him to death and produce another person to replace him. Under the impact of this pressure, Miao Zhuo originally thought that he was going to faint. However, this pressure was like magic that tightly gripped onto his soul, allowing his soul to maintain extreme lucidity even though the pain was multiplied. As a creation master, Miao Zhuo immediately fell into despair. He knew that the left guard was using the power of the law world to shock his soul. If his soul had been injured previously, as long as his aunt was around, she could immediately use spiritual ingredients to heal him. But now that his soul had been shocked by the law world would stimulate the soul and erode a portion of his damaged soul. It was an irreversible damage. Miao Zhuo's eyes immediately turned ashen when his soul was irreversible. He knew that he was destined to never become a Class 4 creation master in this lifetime. If his soul was irreversible, it meant that he would never be able to use his soul force to concoct the spirit fluid. Miao Zhuo, who was now a pinnacle Class 3 creation master, knew that his life was over. The left administrator walked up to Lu Jie and bowed respectfully. When everyone saw the left guard's bow posture, they could not help but feel a little strange. The left guard wasn't standing directly in front of Lu Jie. Instead, he was standing in between Lu Jie and Lin Yuan. From the looks of it, no one could tell if the left guard was bowing to Lu Jie or Lin Yuan. The late third watch. Everyone good night. End of this chapter. Chapter 830. Upon seeing this scene, Long Tao and Li Xian's eyes revealed a look of understanding. Sun Ningxiang, who originally had a calm expression after guessing Lu Jie's identity, was now filled with shock and confusion. Just as Sun Ningxiang was pondering, the other veteran factions and the younger generation of the top factions were also pondering what was going on. The left palm minister, Zhuoming, was a true big shot. Even during the Du Immortal Garden's prime, if their grandfather wanted to visit the left palm minister, Zhuoming, he would have to request a month in advance, and the meeting might not be successful. Big shots always cherished their feathers. The man wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask was Chief Guard Ye's disciple, so he was naturally worthy of Zhuoming's salute. If Zhuoming only wanted to salute Lu Jie, he could just stand in front of Lu Jie. He would never stand between Lu Jie and Lin Yuan like this. In addition, Zhuoming was facing Lin Yuan and Lu Jie, so the others could only see the back of Zhuoming's head. They could not see Zhuoming's face at all. When Zhuoming appeared and burst out with a terrifying aura, everyone subconsciously lowered their heads. No one dared to stare at Zhuoming's face. However, when Sun Ningxiang saw Zhuoming's position, she subconsciously looked up at Zhuoming's expression. Sun Ningxiang realized that the left palm minister, Zhuoming, had actually nodded at Lin Yuan without a trace. This action meant that Zhuoming was not standing in the wrong position at all. He was indeed saluting Lin Yuan. It meant that in Zhuoming's heart, Lin Yuan's position was comparable to Chief Guard Ye's disciple. Sun Ningxiang had already determined that Lin Yuan was the youth wearing the strange mask in Sky City through Lin Yuan's build, the curve of his chin, the way he spoke, his temperament and his voice. Now, Sun Ningxiang knew that Lin Yuan's identity was not as simple as a member of Sky City's private faction. Lin Yuan must have a similar identity as Lu Jie. Sun Ningxiang could not help but think of the inexhaustible creation master resources in Lin Yuan's hands. Suddenly, Sun Ningxiang recalled that the Class 5 creation master, the Moon Empress, had also accepted a disciple, and her disciple was likely to attend the Nyx assembly. With that thought, the mystery in Sun Ningxiang's heart about Sky Castle and Lin Yuan's identity was completely solved. Sun Ningxiang originally thought that the private faction, Sky City, might have a newly promoted Class 5 creation master overseeing it. Otherwise, it would not be able to increase the quality of phase so quickly. Now, Sun Ningxiang understood that she was overthinking. How could it be so easy for a Class 5 creation master to appear in the world? If Pinnacle Class 4 creation masters could break through to Class 5 so easily, the Radiance Federation wouldn't only have 3 Class 5 creation masters after so many years. Although Sun Ningxiang did not dare to guarantee Lin Yuan's identity, she felt that it was close to the mark. Sun Ningxiang, who was still in shock, suddenly felt that her tense heart had relaxed. It didn't matter if Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple or not. Lin Yuan's identity was there, and even the left palm enforcer Zhuoming had to nod and greet Lin Yuan. Now that the Du Immortal Garden and Sky City had a close cooperation, he just had to cling onto Lin Yuan's thigh and continue to develop. The Du Immortal Garden would soon be able to get rid of the Creation Master's lack of resources. However, Sun Ningxiang felt that it was not enough to just cling onto Lin Yuan's thigh. She had to deepen the cooperation between the Du Immortal Garden and Sky City. Even if the Du Immortal Garden had to rely on Sky City to develop, she would not hesitate. Only then would Lin Yuan be able to lend a helping hand to the Du Immortal Garden when it encountered a crisis that it could not resist. For the past few years, Sun Ningxiang felt that it was getting increasingly strenuous to support the Du Immortal Garden alone. This was because the influence of a top-notch faction with depleted creation masters, a lack of high-end combat power, and a lack of top-notch combat power would undoubtedly continue to decline. The Du Immortal Garden's monopoly of some plant phase was getting increasingly strenuous. Otherwise, the Miao family's Beast Creation Institution would not dare to plot against the Du Immortal Garden so brazenly and want to cooperate to slowly annex the Du Immortal Garden. Looking at Lin Yuan's firm and calm expression, Sun Ningxiang felt that she might be able to choose to tie the Du Immortal Garden's future to Lin Yuan. However, before others could think further, the left palm enforcer, Zhuoming, apologized to Lu Jie. Young Palace Lord, Zhuoming didn't expect that there would actually be people who don't know the rules and offend you. These people are participating in the Nyx conference to congratulate the young Palace Lord, but they are so rude. Young Palace Lord, please instruct us how to deal with them. While speaking, Zhuoming's eyes did not even look at the pale Miao Zhua Zheng Kaiyuan, Du Shua, Fang He and Qi Haitao. It was as though the 5 of them were just dust floating on the surface of a shoe and were not worthy of any attention. They would be fine as long as Lu Jie gave the order to wipe them off. Zhuoming's heart was surging with true anger. As a Radiance 100 sequence member, Lu Jie had previously controlled the insect queen to create an insect sea and delayed Cold Frost City for 30 minutes. He had only fainted when the spirit guards arrived. It was unknown how many ordinary people and spirit chi professionals he had protected in Cold Frost City. Although it was not the left palm enforcer Zuoming who had led the team to support Cold Frost City, through this incident, Zuoming rather admired Lu Jie. Even the guard envoys of the spirit guards could not be like Lu Jie in the face of a disaster and still use their bodies to defend despite knowing that they were no match for the enemy. Afterward, when Zuoming found out that the chief guard had accepted a disciple and that the disciple was Lu Jie, he immediately recognized him as his young master. After getting along for this period of time, Zuoming had completely treated Lu Jie as his junior. Zuoming believed that he understood Lu Jie's character very well and that Lu Jie's temper was very good. It was not easy to make Lu Jie angry. Before the start of the Nyx assembly, Zuoming was in charge of the outer palace, while the right palm enforcer was in charge of the inner palace. Zuoming had only sent Chef Supreme's little disciple, Zhong Zhe, and Bamboo Monarch's little disciple, Gu Lang, to the Night Language Pavilion, but someone in the outer palace had taken advantage of his absence to anger Lu Jie. Damn it. The first batch of sin-cleansing weeping willows had been nurtured in the sin-cleansing pond, but they had yet to be bathed in blood. Zuoming felt that this new batch of sin-cleansing weeping willows should be able to make these people who had broken the rules of Night Glory Palace and offended the young palace lord be punished and taught a lesson. Du Shua held Fang He's hand and hung his head. He felt that his stubbornness had delayed Fang He. Otherwise, with Fang He's aloof personality, he would not have meddled in Miao Zhua's business. If it was the right palm enforcer who had come to settle this dispute, Du Shua might have dared to step forward and argue. However, in front of the left palm enforcer, if he dared to step forward and say a word of nonsense, it might lead to even more serious consequences. At that moment, Du Shua heard Lu Jie speak. The first time was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 831. Lu Jie's words caused Du Shua's drooping head to suddenly lift up in despair. Uncle Zhua, it's not as serious as you said. I just don't want the person lying on the ground to appear in the Nyx assembly again. Lu Jie had never been an aggressive person. Even though Du Shua had just talked back to him, he didn't take it to heart. However, he could not tolerate anyone who dared to reach out and insult him by pointing at the tip of his nose. This was not only an insult to Lu Jie's mission as a retainer knight, but it was also a trampling on Lu Jie's faith. Lu Jie would risk his life to protect Lin Yuan's dignity, mission and faith, no matter when, where, or what identity he had. Lu Jie naturally knew what would happen to Miao Zhua if Zuoming threw him out of the Nightfall Palace since he had been rescued by Lin Yuan. However, Lu Jie still did not intend to let Miao Zhua go. This was Lu Jie's insistence. Zuoming was already furious. Before Lu Jie answered, he had already decided to use the newly cultivated weeping willow to cleanse his sins to make those who offended Lu Jie pay the price. However, Zuoming paused when he heard Lu Jie's words. After pausing for a long while, Zuoming revealed a relieved smile. He was a person who was willing to stand up in the face of a great disaster. Why would he care about a few offending words in others' words? Even though Lu Jie's current status was extremely precious, his original intention hadn't changed in the slightest. This was Lu Jie's rare quality, so Zuoming naturally would not raise any other opinions. In that case, we'll do as you say, young palace master. Then Zuoming's sharp eyes swept over Du Shua, Fang He, Qi Haitao, Zheng Kaiyuan, and the disciples of the top and veteran faction standing nearby. Young palace master is very kind. Otherwise, you deserve to reflect for a day under the weeping willow to cleanse your sins. Nightfall Palace has never allowed outsiders to set foot in it. It is a great joy to have the young palace master, which is why this Nyx assembly was held. Don't forget the rules your elders taught you in the outer palace. If your cautious elders in the inner palace find out that you offended the young palace master in the outer palace, I won't punish you. Your elders will automatically send you to the pond to cleanse your sins. Zuoming's words sent chills down everyone's spines. The peak and veteran forces that stood slightly closer to Miao Zhua were also shocked. He was innocent. He stood a little closer just to make it easier for him to eat the melon. But looking at the eyes of the left minister, Zuoming, it seemed like they were all participants in this storm. However, based on their understanding of Zuoming from the rumors, it was possible that Zuoming would be treated as Miao Zhua's accomplice just because they were standing too close to him. Everyone who hadn't participated in the commotion looked at Lu Jie with respect and gratitude in their eyes. At the same time he looked at Miao Zhua who had collapsed on the ground, with eyes filled with disgust and hatred. At this moment, countless people were cursing Miao Zhua in their hearts. It's because of you. I was almost locked in the pond to wash my sins. After a night of repentance under the weeping willow tree, even if he was still alive when he came out, it would take him 5 years to recover. 5 years was too precious for the people present. Not all the Peak and veteran forces were like the Gao family, the Long family, and the Blissful Ocean tribe. Most of the younger generation of the Peak and veteran forces were not as prosperous as the Li family, Li Yun, and Yao Kansas. It was normal for them to have 5 or 6 direct descendants of the younger generation. The younger generation that could be brought to the Nix assembly by their elders could be said to be the most doted on in the forces. However, if they were punished by the left minister, their status in the forces would definitely plummet. Moreover, if they were to spend 5 years recuperating after coming out of the pond, it would be too late. Du Shua held Fang He's hand tightly. After Fang He gave him a signal, the two of them bowed to Lu Jie and said, "Thank you, young palace master, for your magnanimity." Du Shua and Fang He's words were like a fuse. After Du Shua and Fang He's voices sounded, everyone present said, "Thank you, young palace master, for your magnanimity." When the left minister Zhuo Ming arrived, he had heard Du Shua's conflict with Lu Jie. Even if Lu Jie said that he would not punish Du Shua, Zhuo Ming planned to teach Du Shua a lesson in the future. Now that Du Shua was so tactful, Zhuo Ming gave up on finding trouble with the Du family's hearthstone. Lu Jie felt the fervent gazes on him. When he heard everyone say, "Thank you, young palace master, for your magnanimity," he did not have the slightest reaction. However, he said, "The person on the ground is an example. The person on the ground is an example. I don't want anyone to point at Lin Yuan's nose in the future." Lu Jie's words once again drew everyone's attention back to Lin Yuan. When they recalled Zhuo Ming's bow, everyone could not help but guess Lin Yuan's identity again. The left minister, Zhuo Ming, reached out his hand, and the spirit force in his palm surged. Miao Zhuo was like a rag doll as Zhuo Ming grabbed his head and pulled him up from the ground. Then, Zhuo Ming's figure flashed and disappeared from the Yeong Palace's outer palace. He arrived at a giant snake-shaped beast head in the beast head garden outside the Yeong Palace. After Zhuo Ming arrived, the giant snake-shaped beast head suddenly came to life and transformed into a giant python that was about 8 meters long. Zhuo Ming said to the giant python, "Old Steel, this kid talked back to the young palace master." "Old Gang, this kid talked back to the young palace lord. Help me bring him to the pond of sins first. Later, let the Miao family's beast creation garden come to collect him." After hearing Zhuo Ming's words, the python, who was called Old Steel, suddenly had a fierce look in its eyes. Then all the beast heads in the entire beast head garden seemed to have the tendency to transform. Old Steel's hoarse voice sounded. "Someone actually talked back to the young palace master with such a good temper, and it was in our Yeong Palace's territory. It seems like the Miao family has a 3rd emperor-class expert this year. It seems like the beast creation garden is getting more and more arrogant." The left minister, Zhuo Ming, originally had a cold look on his face, but after hearing Old Steel's words, he could not help but roll his eyes. "Old Steel, don't be so dramatic. Even if the Miao family has 100 emperor-class experts, Old Miao would not dare to disrespect our chief guard. This time the Miao family's leader is Miao Qi. I wonder if Miao Qi is really infatuated or if the Miao family still has such intentions. Lord Bamboo Monarch is still so bad at rejecting women. I heard from Wuxia that the person in the elegant jade pavilion who originally did not intend to come to the Great Night Assembly sent a message. He said that he accepted the Great Night Assembly's invitation and has now arrived at the inner palace. There were 2 more to come. End of this chapter. Chapter 832. Old Steel's mind was obviously not on Zhuo Ming's words, and he looked at Zhuo Ming speechlessly. He did not understand why the serious Zhuo Ming was always so gossipy in front of his old buddy. Old Steel did not go to receive Zhuo Ming. If that person from the elegant pavilion really came, it would be a huge matter. It was the same as saying that the Bamboo Monarch's backyard was on fire. Even if such a matter happened in the Night Emperor Palace, unless the chief guard personally took care of it, it would be inconvenient for them to intervene. Given the chief guard's character and temper, she would definitely be too lazy to care about such matters. Old Steel's snake eyes glanced at the unconscious Miao Zhua and said to Zhuo Ming, "Summon the soul sound lyrebird and search this kid's soul. Summon the soul note lyrebird and search this kid's soul. See how this kid offended the young palace master." At the sin cleansing pond, This kid's soul will wake up no matter how severely injured it is and accept the whipping of the sin-cleansing weeping willow. I have decided to use a few sin-cleansing weeping willows to teach this kid a lesson. Zhuoming looked at Old Steel helplessly. He should have just asked directly. Why did he say to use a few sin-cleansing weeping willows to teach Miaozhua a lesson? Given Miaozhua's current soul injuries, he would definitely not be able to last 2 days under a sin-cleansing weeping willow. But to be honest, Zhuoming was also very curious why the good-tempered Wuxia would be so angry. Zhuoming waved his hand and summoned an avian fei with lute-like tail feathers. This avian fei had dozens of crystallized feathers of different colors. The bird's body was ordinary, and the pure white feathers did not have any halo. However, dozens of crystallized feathers of different colors were all decorating the huge lute-like tail feathers behind the bird's body. It made the lute-like tail feathers look like a lute inlaid with dozens of colored gems. After Zhuoming summoned the soul sound lyrebird, it flicked the feathers on its tail feathers, and the lute-like tail feathers played an obscure and harsh zither sound. After the zither sound echoed, Miaozhua revealed an extremely painful expression. Zhuoming had already used the zither sound to search Miaozhua's soul and knew what had happened. In the spirit guards, only Night Leaning Moon knew that Lu Jie was Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Although Night Leaning Moon did not conceal Lu Jie's identity as Lin Yuan's retainer knight, she did not deliberately tell Zhuoming that Lu Jie was Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Thus, Zhuoming was a little puzzled and did not understand why Lu Jie was so protective of Lin Yuan. It could be said that Lu Jie had attacked in anger because Miaozhua had offended Lin Yuan. Zhuoming's body was drenched in cold sweat. Fortunately, Cold Moon and Black Moon had followed the Moon Empress to the core region of Night Dawn Palace for a meeting. Otherwise, if Tsang Yu and Xian Yu found out that their little highness had been offended, Miaozhua's fate would definitely be 10 times worse than it was now. Even the normal progress of the Nyx assembly would be affected. Since Miaozhua had not only offended the young palace master but also the Radiant Moon Palace's little highness, Zhuoming said to Old Gang. Old Gang, you don't have to send Miaozhua to the pond. Just send him back to the Miao family's old mansion in Beast Creation Garden. Tell old Miao that his grandson is in this state because our young palace master took the initiative. The reason is that his grandson offended the Radiant Moon Palace's little highness. As for how to deal with it, let old Miao decide for himself. Old Gang was a little surprised. He did not expect the kid on the ground to be involved with the Radiant Moon Palace. This was like poking a huge hornet's nest. The huge python swallowed Miaozhua, who was lying on the ground, and disappeared in a flash. At this time, the right minister of the Night Palace, Wuxia, was sweating from time to time. No matter how powerful a dimensional creature was, no matter how many dimensional creatures surrounded it, Jinyoyu had never felt such emotions. It was because Wuxia did not know how to deal with the current situation and did not dare to deal with it casually. The real bigwigs were all holding a meeting in the core region of Night Dawn Palace. The people in the inner palace were the leaders of the various top factions and veteran factions. Wuxia, who had won the rock-paper-scissors contest with Zhuoming, thought that he had chosen an easy job. However, he did not expect that the person in the elegant pavilion who had refused to participate in the Nyx assembly had decided to participate again. At this moment, a woman dressed in a luxurious purple robe, which was embroidered with a purple-golden bamboo base and golden-yellow peonies, was standing at the entrance of the inner palace of Yiyang Palace. The woman had a delicate and pretty face, and when matched with the 2 pearl earrings on her ears, it was as if the entire world was frozen in place. The pearl necklace around her neck seemed to be full of dreamy colors, showing her peerless beauty. It was this woman's appearance that made Wuxia's forehead sweat. The moment this peerless beauty appeared, she immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. Previously, Wang Fuxiang was just the mysterious elegant pavilion master to the veteran factions. Only a few top factions knew about the secret between Wang Fuxiang and Lord Bamboo Monarch. However, ever since Lord Bamboo Monarch was infected with bad luck and no longer helped the top factions refine law crystals, the secret between Wang Fuxiang and Lord Bamboo Monarch spread. Even among the veteran factions, everyone knew about it. After the secret spread, even the current family heads of the top factions did not dare to underestimate Wang Fuxiang in the slightest. Whether it was true or not, the current family heads of the top factions all wore a respectful expression on their faces. At that moment, the heads of the top factions who knew about the secret between Wang Fuxiang and Lord Bamboo Monarch could not help but look at Miao Qi, who was also wearing a purple dress. Her dress was embroidered with 2 red trees. The trees were full of red fruits, and the red fruits were decorated with a few bamboo shadows on the sides of Miao Qi's body. The heads of the top factions were excited. Would anything good happen when Wang Fuxiang and Miao Qi met? They did not expect that one day, they would be able to publicly take advantage of Lord Bamboo Monarch. Long Tu, who was sitting with Li Yun Yao Can's current family head, Li Zhen, looked at the time. The meeting in the core area of Night Dawn Palace should be over by now. When Lord Bamboo Monarch appeared and saw Wang Fuxiang and Miao Qi, he wondered what kind of expression he would have. However, the matter between Wang Fuxiang and Miao Qi was ultimately Lord Bamboo Monarch's family matter. How it would be resolved would depend on Lord Bamboo Monarch himself. At that moment, a woman pulled a middle-aged man from his seat and walked past the crowd toward Wang Fuxiang. When the woman saw the man absent-mindedly eating a piece of jade date flour pastry, she could not help but pull the middle-aged man's ear. Li Zhonglin. All you know is to eat. Wherever you go you'll eat. Quick, come with me to say hello to Big Sister Xiang. The second was even better. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.